This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate third part of What If Naruto Awakens Dark Chakra. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Naruto observed as medical ninjas began transferring Neji to a scale and carrying him to the hospital. Then he sighed and cast a pitying glance at Neji. "I hope you will know what I am talking about some other day," he murmured. Naruto nodded as Kirin complimented him, saying, "I'm sure you will, we just have to hope he gets it. Nicely done, by the way, to think you've grown exponentially in just a month of training." Kirin laughed as Naruto remarked, "Thanks, but it was because of you, the Nine Tails, and the pervy sages training that got me where I am now." Kirin remarked, "Modest aren't we?" He questioned, "Am I wrong though?" "Not necessarily, but you were the one that did the training, not us," Kirin replied. "I suppose you're right," Naruto remarked, turning to face the massive crater and the hole he had made in the wall during their battle. Naruto muttered, "I might have gone overboard a little." Genma then spoke, grabbing everyone's attention. Everyone nodded before rising from their seats. "Okay everyone, we're going to take a short break, that would give us some time to get the battlefield prepared for the next fight," he said. Naruto caught everyone's attention by saying, "You don't have to worry, I can fix up the arena," as he moved towards the crater he had created. Genma said, "Don't worry about it, we can repair it," but then, like everyone else in the stands, his eyes widened in shock at what Naruto was doing. A glowing white circle with markings appeared in the palm of Naruto's hand as he raised his hand to the crater. Crystal magic. Reconstruct. The crater started to fill up, restoring its level surface. After pointing the circle at the hole in the wall, Naruto watched as it started to mend itself. With a satisfied nod, he looked around him. The battlefield appeared as good as new, as though the damage he caused had never happened. Naruto said, "Okay, that should do it," and started to walk out. However, not before he stuck out his hand and his sword, which was still floating, came towards him. He grabbed it and placed it in its scabbard around his waist. Everyone just stood there and watched, looking like they had been smacked on, until he vanished up the stairs. Cage booth. New scene. Jiraiya, who was standing next to Hiruzen, who was also looking shocked, said, "So what do you think?" to the audience. Hiruzen looked at Jiraiya and said, "How did he get this strong in just a month of training?" Jiraiya grinned. "Me, Kirin and one other made a schedule for Naruto and we worked him hard this past month, and believe me I was surprised at the rate he was progressing as well," he continued. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes at Jiraiya. He had no idea that someone else would be teaching Naruto. He asked or rather demanded of Jiraiya, the Cage, who was listening to their conversation in silence, "What do you mean one other? Who else was training Naruto this past month?" Jiraiya is present, then. This presents an issue. He appears to have trained Naruto, and the invasion is about to begin. However, who is this Kirin and the other he mentioned? It appears that they also trained him, he thought. Jiraiya looked at the Cage and then back at Hiruzen, saying, "That information is complicated to answer right now, but I'll tell you everything that happened after all of this is over." Hiruzen glanced at the Cage and nodded, understanding what Jiraiya was talking about. "All right, but I expect an explanation," he responded. Jiraiya gave a nod. Jiraiya nodded once more as Hiruzen questioned, "Naruto seems to be quite skilled in using a sword. Did Kirin teach him how to wield one?" Jiraiya said, alluding to what Naruto had just done to the arena. "Yep, that was all him. He even taught him how to do that as well." Jiraiya shook his head, answering Hiruzen's inquisitive question, "Speaking of what was that just now? I've never seen it before." Jiraiya shrugged and said, "I have no idea, Naruto or Kirin haven't told me what it was." "Okay. What about that sword art he used?" asked he. "Well, they're really called sword skills, or that's what Kirin called it. They're like another set of sword techniques, but they kinda use what Naruto just did." Jiraiya attempted to clarify. "Kirin has to tell you the rest. I can't really explain it in detail. Neither can I." Hiruzen gave a nod. Hiruzen considered the news he had just been given, or portions of it, to consider how much Naruto has developed in just 1 month. Though he can be unpredictable at times, that shouldn't be possible. Grinning, Hiruzen wondered who the other person was who had trained Naruto, but he wouldn't know the answer until the tests were over. Change of scene. Viewers standing. "Yeah, Naruto's fight with Neji was awesome," said Kiba. Shyly, Hinata replied, "Yeah, it was fun. And Naruto has grown so strong." Kiba stood up and stretched. "Well, I'm going to get some food, do you want something, Hinata?" She gave a headshake. Hinata looked in her sensei's direction and said, "No, I'm fine, thank you. I think I'm going to go by Kurenai Sensei and the others over there." Hinata nodded, got up, and headed over to the group as Kiba said, "Well, alright, I'll come join you in a little bit then, see ya." Shikamaru remarked, "Naruto's match was something else, huh?" "Yes, he's grown stronger since our last visit," Sakura said as the girls nodded. "Yes, he is proficient with a sword," Yukino remarked. "I wonder if he could teach me how to use one too," she pondered. "I wonder how he fixed up the arena though, and what that glowing circle in his hand was," Ino pondered. Asuma nodded in agreement and Kurenai said, "Well, you'll just have to ask him yourself. I'm curious on how he learned the jutsu he used though. That was obviously wind chakra. But it was also something else as well, I could sense it," Ino replied. Asuma asked, "Can you identify it, Ino?" But Ino shook her head. "I see. We can just ask Naruto directly when he gets here," Ino replied. "That's if he wants to. Remember, he didn't answer any of our questions regarding that power he showed in the forest or the preliminaries," Shikamaru responded. "Well, he can surely answer some of the questions regarding his fight with Neji. It's not like we're asking about that power anyway, so what's the harm?" Sakura responded. "It doesn't matter, it's still his decision if he wants to or if he doesn't want to answer Sakura," Yukino replied. "Yeah, but it wouldn't hurt to try, right?" she responded. "Not quite sure," Yukino said. I guess not." With the group nodding in agreement, Ino said, "Okay, how about we go to him right now? He's coming to the spectator stands anyway, so we can meet him halfway." The group then got up. A voice said, When the group turned around, Hinata was standing there blushing. Hinata exclaimed, Can I come with you? To see and Naruto," which caused the group to glance at one another before turning back to her. Sakura said, making Hinata blush, "Sure you can, after all he did fulfill the promise he made." Glancing at Hinata, Yukino frowned slightly, feeling that uneasy sensation in her stomach once more. She is probably the only person who is aware that Hinata has a crush on Naruto, as everyone else, including Naruto, is unaware of her sentiments. She also believed that, like her and Sasuke at the academy, they would make a wonderful couple. However, she no longer feels the same way as she did before because of these new feelings. "Okay, let's go," exclaimed Ino, as she and the others soon began to move. Scene alteration. "Why do I feel as though I will soon be questioned, more accurately, questioned and interrogated," Naruto thought. "Well, you did give them quite a performance, you will be getting a lot of attention now," Kirin responded. The 9. Tails said abruptly, "He's right, you will undoubtedly be receiving a lot of attention as a result of your fight with the Hyuga. So I guess that's not going to help, is it?" Naruto sighed and looked up as he spoke. Naruto pondered, "So what should I say to my friends if they ask what I think they're going to ask?" The 9. Tails stated, "I think you should just tell them what you want them to know and not beat around the bush about it." "I agree, there's certain information that is best not to say, for example your magic, and your dragon arts. It'll be hard to explain what it is and how you manage to learn it, but your sword skills, and storm style. You can tell them since that would be more easier to explain," Kirin responded. "Alright," Naruto mentally nodded. "Naruto," said a voice. Breaking out of his reverie, Naruto looked up to see Shino leaning against the wall as if he was waiting for him. Shino shook his head when Naruto said, "Oh hey Shino, did you need something?" Shino said, "Nothing in particular, Naruto. I was just curious about your recent change and those jutsus you used earlier." Naruto nodded, realizing that many people would be curious about his current changes, especially considering that they all occurred in less than a month. Shino nodded and listened intently as Naruto said, "I can't really go into details about my personal changes at the moment, but I can tell you about the jutsu I used. It was something I've been working on that took me a while." First, Naruto was about to begin when he was interrupted by Naruto. "Huh?" When Naruto turned around, he saw Ino leaping at him and nuzzling his face, causing him to stumble briefly until he regained his sense of direction. "Ino?" A bewildered Naruto asked. "You did great, I thought you were gonna miss your match but you showed up and won." "Congratulations," Ino replied with a grin. "Yeah. Thank you," he said while attempting to remove Ino from his grasp. As Yukino watched this with a scowl on her face, a scorching dark aura encircled her. Shikamaru began to sweat as he slowly backed away from her. Naruto inquired, "Do you think you can get off now?" She gripped harder and said, "Oh come on Naruto, don't be so mean." Naruto sighed. He knew he could easily get her off thanks to his strength, but he didn't want to hurt her in the process. Naruto sighed with relief that Ino's hands were no longer on him as Yukino stomped over and yanked Ino off of him, saying, "Ino, back off," through gritted teeth. He said, "Thanks, Yukino." Yukino nodded and grinned at him. Naruto noticed that Hinata, Sakura, and Shikamaru were also present. He watched as Chakra approached him and leapt onto his shoulder. Ino exclaimed, "What was that about?" "You were in Naruto's personal space, so I was just getting you off of him," Yukino replied. Ino questioned, her eyes narrowing, "You sure that's the only reason?" Yukino narrowed her eyes as well and asked, "Why would there be any other reason?" "That's enough, you two. Why are you here anyway?" "I was going to the spectator stands after I was done answering Shino's question," Naruto replied. Naruto nodded as Shikamaru said, "They wanted to meet you halfway, so we decided to make our way over to you." Sakura inquired, "What did Shino ask about?" "He just wanted to know what was the jutsu I did earlier in my fight with Neji," Naruto replied. "We also had some inquiries," Sakura remarked. Yukino uttered hastily, "But only if you're willing to answer them." "I can answer some of your questions," Naruto said with a nod. "Are you sure?" inquired Yukino. With a nod, Naruto. Shikamaru inquired, "In that case, what was that jutsu you used in your fight?" This was Shino's question as well. "First, I have 3 chakra natures," Naruto responded. "You have 3? A shocked Yukino asked, and Naruto nodded. "Yeah, I have wind, water, and lighting natures. What you all saw was a jutsu that requires me to combine those 3 together." "What is it?" inquired Shino. "It's called storm style. Now usually it would just be water and lighting I have to combine, but I made a mistake of combining wind to it as well, which allowed me to create a storm just like you saw," Naruto clarified. "That's incredible. And you managed to do that in only a month?" Ino replied. "Surprisingly, yes, it did take me most of the month to just do one jutsu though," he responded. "Well, either way that's impressive, Naruto. I had to take more than a month to make my ice-style jutsus," Yukino replied. "Thanks. Is there any more questions you have?" asked he. "What was that sword attack you did on Neji?" Shikamaru asked after giving it some thought and glancing at the swords on Naruto's waist and back. "Yeah, it looked like it just went through his defenses when he did his own jutsu," Ino stated. "That was a sword art. It's a type of skill that doesn't use chakra but something else. As you saw, it was a wind-style type of skill that I used against Neji. Because it wasn't chakra, it caused my attack to go through his jutsu that was supposed to repel or reflect anything in chakra. But since I didn't use that for my attack, it went right through it and made contact," Naruto clarified. Shino inquired, "What is this something you use then?" But Naruto shook his head. "Sorry, but I can't answer that," he replied. "Why not?" inquired Sakura. "Because it's personal information that you don't need to know," Naruto replied. "Okay, what about what you did when you fixed the arena?" Ino responded. "I can't answer that either, but what I used is the same thing I did for my sword art," said Naruto. He asked as he surveyed the area, "Any more questions?" Sakura questioned, "What was that dragon art you did?" "That's personal information as well," he responded. Sakura questioned once more, "Okay, who trained you then?" "That guy I landed with, he was a student of the old man when he was a sensei. His name is Jiraiya, but a pervy sage should be his real name. He is the one who trained me," Naruto said simply. Yukino inquired, "Why do you say that?" "Because when I first met him he was peeping on the girls in the hot springs," said he. Shikamaru and Shino were both sweating profusely, while the girls were looking disgusted. "Comprehensible," Chakra nodded as she observed their faces. As they opened their mouths to speak, Naruto interrupted, saying, "I know what you were about to say, but you have to admit that I wouldn't have gotten stronger for the exams without him." Sakura responded, "Yeah, but still, Naruto, was said too sweetly by Yukino, Ino, and Hinata." Naruto and Kirin suddenly felt chilly as they turned to face Naruto with a dark, sweet smile. Fearing for her life, Chakra fled into Naruto's red jacket, instantly recalling how, for some reason, Iris had stared at Kirin in that same way. "Don't let me handle this on my own," Naruto uttered. "I apologize." Chakra's only response was Naruto stammered, "Why? Yes." As the girls approached him, which caused him to back up a little. Shikamaru whispered to Shino, who merely nodded, "I wouldn't want to be in Naruto's position right now." With the same dark, endearing smile that Ino and Hinata shared when they nodded in agreement, Yukino asked, "You better not become like him, okay?" The 9. Tails remarked, "That is terrifying to look at, Kami." I still remember that death smile, Kirin remarked, recalling the same endearing grin on Iris's face when she expressed her desire for him to not turn into a pervert like the ones they had witnessed. In the interim, scene alteration, it was time for Celeste's training when she and Iris abruptly stopped and looked toward the village's hot springs, where they saw some men attempting to peep on the girls' side. Celeste and Iris had just finished eating lunch when they were walking down a village street. When Celeste saw this, she sighed and scowled, asking, "I don't understand why they do this." "Well, that's just how certain men are, but some like my beloved and hopefully his partner are sweet and caring, and I know he'll never become one of them," Iris agreed. Celeste cocked her head to the side and said, "Just curious, what would you do if he did become one?" Her expression changed to one of fear when she noticed the dark, endearing smile on her friend's or teacher's face. Iris? Celeste shivers more as Iris says, "There's no need to ask that because I know he won't turn into one. And if he somehow did, well, maybe if he sees me again he'll reconsider. As an added bonus, I'll teach you how to ensure that the person you fall in love with doesn't end up like one of them," Iris said as she walked away, and Celeste just gave a scared nod. "My beloved, I hope you remember not to become one of them. If not, I'm going to have to remind you why you shouldn't become one in the first place, and I know you don't want that, right?" Iris grinned as she looked up into the air. As she strolled on, she thought this while maintaining a smile. Scene alteration. For some reason, the chilling sensation intensified tenfold, and Kirin looked around him fearfully, asking, "Why am I feeling like this?" His thoughts quivered. When the girls eventually stopped acting agitated, Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. That was the most terrifying scene he had ever witnessed, and he hopes he and Kirin and Chakra never see it again. Naruto said, "Okay, are there any more questions?" But nobody raised their hands. After gathering himself, Naruto said, "Okay, then we should get back to the spectator stands for the next match. I think our short break is almost over." Soon after, Shino and the others joined him on the walk. Shino uttered, "Naruto, I forgot to say something." "What is it?" inquired Naruto. Shino unexpectedly said to Naruto, "I wanted to say thank you." He questioned, "What for?" "For keeping your promise that you will win against Neji," said Shino. While the others simply listened, Naruto glanced first at Shino and then directly in front of him. Unaware that he was making Hinata blush, he said, "No problem, I wasn't going to let what Neji did to Hinata slide." Hinata mutely uttered, "Thank you and Naruto." "No problem, Hinata." Naruto gave her a gentle smile, causing her to blush once more. When Yukino saw this, she scowled. Naruto had not given her the same smile since the forest. Instead, he had only ever given her a straight face and never the same expression he had given Hinata. Yukino said, "Hey Naruto, your new outfit looks good on you by the way." Naruto turned to face her and noticed that she had also changed her attire. "You look gorgeous too," Naruto said with a straight face. Yukino paused and gave Naruto a wide-eyed stare. Beautiful, he finds me attractive?" "Yukino, is something wrong?" he inquired. She blushed and said, "No, I'm fine. It's just that you called me beautiful all of a sudden." Naruto said, making Yukino blush even more. "What's wrong with that? I always thought you were." Alright, she exclaimed, resuming her walk. Enviously, Ino squinted her eyes at Yukino. When Ino called him, "Hey Naruto," Naruto looked up at Ino. Trying to look sexy, she asked, "How'd I look?" He walked on, saying, "Same as ever." After answering, Ino's expression became glum. "But you still look good," Naruto said. After giving him a quick glance and grinning, Ino joined the group's stroll. A chilly voice behind them said, "Hold on." After a brief visit to see Lee in the hospital during the training month, the group turned to face the Sand Team and Gaara, who was staring directly at Naruto. Shikamaru and Yukino's bodies tensed at the sight of Gaara, and Shikamaru used his shadow possession jutsu to stop him from killing Lee. It appeared that things would turn ugly between them, but Sensei intervened before anything could happen. Naruto inquired, "Do you need something from us?" Yukino was waiting by Naruto in case something happened. Gaara didn't say anything but instead moved toward Naruto with his siblings. Naruto was staring down, but Gaara was standing directly in front of him. Gaara snarled, giving everyone shivers as he said, "You better be prepared because when I'm done with Sasuke, I'm going to kill you when it's our turn so I can prove my existence." Yukino automatically grabbed Naruto's new jacket. Naruto noticed Yukino was trembling a little and turned to face Gaara, who was leaving with his siblings. While his group stared in confusion, Gaara's two siblings turned to face Naruto in shock as he said, "You can try, but I'll doubt you'll succeed." Number 1. Naruto's eyes were green as Gaara turned to face him slowly, glaring at him before slowly opening his eyes in shock. The room had become dark, and Gaara noticed that a large figure with black hair that had a hint of red in a black outfit was standing behind Naruto, staring down at him with its own green eyes. Without saying anything, Gaara turned around and began to leave the group. For a brief period, the group watched Gaara and his two siblings leave in silence. Sakura questioned, shaking her head, What was that all about?" Shino nodded and Ino remarked, "That guy. Something is wrong with him." With Hinata nodding, Shino said, "My team encountered him in the forest. We watched him kill 3 ninjas without any hesitation." After saying, "We should go," Naruto resumed his stroll. With a nod, the others got up and moved to walk. It was now time for Sasuke's match to start, so they all took a seat as they arrived at the spectator stands. Everywhere around us, Naruto uttered. "Yes, exactly what are you going to do?" Chakra inquired. Nothing at the moment, but Naruto sensed that some of the civilians were hiding. "It's not just that, but there's even something strange about that cage. You might want to be ready just in case. Who knows when they will strike," Kirin said. "I predict that they will launch this invasion when it's Gaara and Uchiha's turn to battle," the 9 Tails uttered. "Why do you say that?" Naruto inquired. "I believe that the Sands are a part of this invasion. They're working with the sound and intend to use Gaara as a starting signal. If that's true, then we don't know at what point in the match is the signal for them to start," Kirin responded. Chakra said, "All we can do right now is keep an eye out," to which Naruto nodded. Genma called out to the crowd, "Okay, it's time for the final match. Will Sasuke, Uchiha and Gaara of the Sand please make their way to the arena?" They watched as Gaara appeared once more with the sand, but Sasuke was still hiding. Just as the crowd was growing agitated and Genma was about to declare the match in Gaara's favor, a gust of wind blew across the stadium. With Sasuke wearing a new outfit and Kakashi and Sasuke standing in the center, everyone in the stands watched as the wind picked up in the center. Although impressive, it lacked the dramatic quality of Naruto's entrance from the sky. Kakashi said, "Sorry, we're not late, are we?" Genma shook his head negatively. Genma said, "No, but you were cutting it close," and Kakashi nodded before vanishing up into the stands to sit beside Guy and Lee. Guy had only recently arrived with his sensei, having missed the first few matches due to injury, but he was now here. Naruto said, "Hey Lee, how you feeling?" With fire in his eyes, Lee exclaimed, "I'm okay, just you wait, when I get better I'm going to train extra harder from now on." Guy grinned and gave a thumbs up, "That's right Lee, I'm going to give you a more rigorous training schedule so your flames of youth will burn bright as the sun." Guy. "Sensei!" exclaimed Lee. Guy exclaimed, "Lee, as well." They caused a drop of sweat on everyone in their vicinity. Naruto turned around and said, "Okay, don't overdo it then." "I'm glad Sasuke is here and didn't miss his match," said Sakura. Shikamaru remarked, "He was cutting it close." "Well, either way he's here, I hope he'll be okay against Gaara," Yukino replied. "Don't worry about Sasuke, I trained him so he can stand a chance against Gaara," Kakashi said, turning to face Naruto. To his surprise, he was wearing a new outfit and had a sword on his waist and a large one on his back. Yukino was also there. "Wow Naruto, you look great, and it seems you know how to wield a sword now. You look good as well Yukino," Kakashi said. Yukino said, "Thanks, Kakashi, Sensei," and Naruto nodded. Kakashi inquired, "So, Naruto, Yukino, how did your matches go?" "It went good, I won my match," he stated. Yukino remarked, "Same as me." With a nod, Naruto and Yukino turned to face the arena. Kakashi said, "That's good, that will increase your chances of becoming a Chunin." "Let's see where this goes," Naruto considered. Genma leapt back, not wanting to be in the middle of the impending massacre, and exclaimed, "All right. Let the match between Sasuke Uchiha and Gaara of the Sand commence. Begin." Gaara shot his quirk at Sasuke to start the battle, but he caught it. He tossed it aside and watched as Gaara gave the order to move his sand forward, but Sasuke vanished and then reappeared in a flash. He assumed a stance that caused a certain pair of green eyes to gasp. While observing Sasuke mimic his moves, Rock Lee declared, "That's my taijutsu stance." Sasuke wasn't perfect, but he was still able to move as quickly as Lee when wearing weights. Guy frowned as he turned to face his eternal rival. As the battle went on, Sasuke moved swiftly and attempted to land a few blows, but Gaara's sand forced him back. Then everything changed as Gaara formed an eyeball out of sand and encased his body in a ball of hardening sand, hovering over them. Before passing through the hand seals, Sasuke leapt back up the wall behind him. Lighting began to cover his left hand. Glancing up from his book to the man, Guy said to Kakashi, "So that's why you had him copy Lee's style and speed. Your own personal technique." Sakura then asked what Sasuke was doing. At this moment, he is executing a jutsu that your sensei created on his own. It's called Lighting Blade, because it was said that Kakashi split a lightning bolt in half using that same technique. Sasuke is using a powered down version known as Chidori, which is called that because it gives off the sound of 1,000 birds chirping. Guy told the genin surrounding him, and sure enough, everyone could hear the sound of birds chirping as Sasuke ran down the wall, Sharingan blazing, and made a direct hit for the ball. With a sly smile, Kankuro shook his head. There's no way he'll be able to pierce through. Gaara's sand is the ultimate defense. As Temari watched Sasuke run across the field, dodging all the sand that came at him, she worried for her younger brother and replied, "I wouldn't be too sure, Kankuro. That's the same thing we thought about that Lee kid." Sasuke approached the ball of sand and extended his hand. Chidori. With his arm piercing through the sand and into Gaara's shoulder, Sasuke let out a cry. Several things happened in the stadium as a result of this. The first was the startled exclamation from Gaara's two siblings, and the second was a scream from Gaara. Gaara cried out, "My blood, it's my blood. You made me bleed," as Sasuke attempted to pull his arm off of him. He then watched as another arm pushed him out and noticed a creature roaring from the sand and staring at him. Sasuke asked himself, what the hell was that? As he watched the sand around him disappear and Gaara fall to his knees, clutching his shoulders. Naruto stood up fast, but as soon as he did, he felt as though his senses were being sharpened. He turned slowly in the direction of the cage booth and noticed that the cage was grinning. Subsequently, there were multiple blasts in the village, one of which took place in the cage booth. Feathers then started to drop in the stadium, causing everyone to nod off. Subdued Sound and Sand.Nin emerged from the throng and launched an attack on the Konoha shinobi in the vicinity. Swiftly drawing his sword from his waist, Naruto used it to deflect a sand ninja's impending attack. Then, he spun to deliver a roundhouse kick to the enemy's head, instantly knocking him out. "So it seems they waited until Gaara was out of control and that was the signal then," Kirin stated. "Yes, Chakra is currently hiding in my jacket," Naruto said, and Chakra nodded. "All right." Naruto then started to use his dark abilities since he was now surrounded by a barrier that prevented the genjutsu from harming him. In order to protect the others, Yukino exclaimed, "Release," as the others followed suit. As he pulled Yukino near to him and stopped the opposing ninja's next attack, Naruto's senses intensified. "You alright, Yukino?" inquired Naruto. "Yeah, I'm fine, thank you," she replied. Naruto nodded, releasing her since they were now covering each other from behind. Naruto turned to see some of the enemy sand and sand ninjas being handled by Kakashi, Guy, and the other senseis. After using his sword to block an approaching kunai, Naruto noticed that some sand ninja were in front of him. He turned to glance behind him and saw some sound ninja on Yukino's side as well. Naruto exclaimed, "Yukino, when I say get down, you get down, understand?" as water began to envelop his blade. Keeping her gaze fixed on the adversary, Yukino asked, "What are you going to do?" He said, "Just trust me on this," as his sword turned entirely blue and began to slick with water. As Yukino nodded, she witnessed the sand and sound ninjas sprint in their direction. "Yukino now!" exclaimed Naruto as she sat down. Sword art. Water style. Whirlpool. As the charged water energy emerged, Naruto swung his sword to encircle the two and create a whirlpool that destroyed the ceiling above, shielding them from the enemy's blows as they became entangled in the vortex. With a sigh, Naruto turned to face Yukino, who was gazing at him intently. He asked, "You alright?" and she gave him a nod. He nodded as she replied, "Yes." Glancing down to the arena, Naruto saw the Sand siblings carrying Gaara begin their journey towards the forest, with Sasuke following closely behind. He then turned to face the cage booth, where a purple barrier had materialized, preventing anyone from entering or leaving. He thought, "Shit," then grabbed Yukino and leapt over the railings. Naruto, she exclaimed, startled. Naruto exclaimed as they began running, "Kakashi. Sensei. Sasuke is going after the sand team, they're heading into the forest. Me and Yukino are going to chase after them. Damn, Sakura, Ino, and Shikamaru. I want you free to go after them for support while we deal with these guys here, Kakashi ordered. They nodded and started towards the forest, not realizing that they had some followers as well. Wait, Kakashi exclaimed, but it was too late, they had already left. Scene alteration. Running from the stadium, Naruto and Yukino witnessed the mayhem that had broken out in the village. They observed a massive snake frolicking through the village. There's chaos everywhere, Yukino muttered. When Naruto turned to face the purple barrier, he saw that Orochimaru, who was disguised, was fighting the Kazekage alongside Hiruzen and Jiraiya. Naruto said, "Damn, Yukino, back up a bit." She followed his instructions, and he proceeded to bite into his thumb to draw blood and make some hand gestures. Summoning Jutsu. When Naruto touched the ground, seals materialized and smoke shot out of it. Flare emerged in her human form, still as stunning as ever. She turned to face Naruto after glancing around at the village's devastation and the enormous snake. Her question was, "Do you need something, Naruto?" Naruto gave a nod. "I need you to deal with that snake right there, and after you're done I want you to help the civilians and get them to safety and help any leaf ninja dealing with the sand and sound ninjas." She replied with a nod. Saying, "You got it." Flare staring at Flare, Yukino uttered, "Naruto, who is this?" "Her name is Flare and I'll explain more later, but right, we need to go," Naruto replied. Flare rolled her eyes at Naruto's warning to, "Also be careful." "Oh please, you don't have to worry, besides you know what I am. It will take a lot to take me down," Flare grinned. "Yes, but that doesn't worry me for you," replied Naruto as he started to run in the direction where Yukino had inadvertently caused Flare to blush a little. "Idiot," she grinned and muttered as she dashed in the direction of the snake, climbing up on top of several buildings to gain height. As she leapt from the last structure she was on, it was engulfed in flames and a red light appeared. She transformed into a dragon as the flames subsided, and she let out a loud roar that caught the snake's attention. R. Flare uttered, "Let's go, you damn serpent." The snake started moving in her direction, and Flare followed suit. They clashed as Flare started her own fight. Scene alteration. R. What was that? Exclaimed Yukino. "That's Flare, she's dealing with the snake right now," Naruto replied. In the forest, Yukino and Naruto were jumping from tree to tree. "Naruto, the sand team and your teammate are just ahead," Chakra remarked, and Naruto nodded. "Many thanks, Chakra," he said, turning to face Kirin. Naruto said, "Hey Kirin, I need a favor." He inquired, "What is it?" "I know the old man and the pervy sage can handle themselves, but I can't shake the feeling something bad will happen to one of them," worried Naruto. "Can you go back to the arena and help them?" Kirin was determined not to allow that to happen again because he knew from his past that he had experienced something similar with Iris. In front of Yukino and Naruto, who were startled to see someone else again, Kirin said, "All right, I'll do it, and don't worry, I'll make sure they're both alive." Naruto said, "Thank you, and here." He reached behind him to retrieve the Sword of Darkness, gave it to Kirin, who accepted it with a nod. Naruto warned, "Now watch out." Kirin said, "Okay, and you too, I'll be heading now." He then spread out his red and black wings and took off toward the stadium. Naruto thought, "You better not die on me, old man, pervy sage." Yukino questioned, "Naruto, who was that?" Just as Naruto opened his mouth to reply, 5 sand and sound ninja materialized in front of them. He drew his sword and assumed a stance, saying, "Damn, I'll tell you later." Yukino did the same, but before they could act, they noticed some kunai and smoke bombs move in the direction of the startled enemy ninja. "What the hell?" exclaimed one of them when Naruto and Yukino turned to face them. Sakura, Shikamaru, and Ino were approaching. Sakura asked, "Yukino, Naruto, are you okay?" Sakura, "Thank you." Yukino replied. Naruto asked, "Did Kakashi-sensei send you to help us?" And Shikamaru gave a nod. Naruto nodded and he said, "Yeah, he asked us to be support when you go after Sasuke." "Okay," he said, turning to face the opposing ninja. "Naruto, I feel another enemy approaching from behind," Chakra uttered. "You have to be joking," Naruto remarked, glancing back. Naruto spoke as his sword began to turn yellow and light up with lightning, saying, "We don't have much time, there's going to be some more enemies approaching from behind us." Shikamaru spoke, and Ino nodded. "Okay, me and Ino will deal with the ones from behind while you, Yukino, and Sakura head on ahead." Turning to face Yukino, Naruto said, "Okay, be careful." Naruto pointed to the sand and said, "Yukino, I want you to freeze their legs so they can't move." She nodded. With some hand gestures, she said, "Okay. Ice style, freezing trap." The enemy ninja's legs were frozen in place as Yukino slammed her hands to the ground. "What? I can't move. Damn." As the ninjas were attempting to escape, Naruto suddenly materialized in front of them, his sword raised. Sword art. Lighting style, swirling thunder. Next, lightning struck Naruto's sword from the sky. When it stopped, he whirled around, unleashing the lightning energy he had stored, electrocuting the enemy and making them scream in agony. Ah! When Naruto gestured for Yukino and Sakura to leave, the ninjas fell to the ground unconscious. He said, "Come on, let's go." They nodded and started to sprint through the trees. "So this is something I'll have to deal with in order to fulfill my dream in the future?" Naruto thought. That's the current situation. Even with what Iris and Kirin did in the past, all the animosity and devastation reappeared in your era, Naruto, Chakra remarked melancholy. Shutting his eyes, Naruto relived the devastation he had witnessed in the village, the fighting, the bodies of fallen shinobi, and their journey to the forest with Yukino in pursuit of Sasuke. "I'm going to make sure Kirin and Iris see their dream come true. I'm going to change this world for the better," Naruto declared, watching as his hair started to turn black and red with hints of blue and his red and blue jacket turning black and red with silver accents, matching the rest of his outfit. With a determined expression, Naruto opened his now green eyes and looked in the direction of Sasuke and the Sand Team. I swear. There was still mayhem and devastation in Leaf Village. As they attempted to defend their residence from the intruders, the Sand and Sound Ninja engaged in continuous combat with the Leaf Shinobi. While some Leaf forces were engaged in combat with the enemy, others were attempting to evacuate civilians. Medical ninjas in the hospital were tending to those who had suffered severe injuries during the invasion, but more casualties kept coming in, making the job of the medics even more difficult. "Hi. Here are a few more injured people." Smiling at someone on his shoulder, a male ninja said. "Already, once more." "Yes, we will definitely be there. Going to get some help quickly," said a female nurse. After returning with a few medics, the nurse started tending to the injured. None of them realized they were being observed from a distance while going about their business. The creature gave them a long look before moving closer to them. Nobody noticed the creature until it was getting closer, and when one of the nurses screamed to let everyone know what she was seeing, everyone turned to look. Snake. When one of the civilians yelled, the others started to fear. "Protect the civilians at all cost." A male ninja yelled as he pulled out a kunai and prepared to battle the enormous snake with his allies. As it approached them, the snake slithered over and bared its two sharp fangs before launching an attack. "Get ready." Just as the snake was about to bite, someone grabbed its neck and threw it to the other side of the ninjas and civilians. With a shocked expression, the ninjas and civilians looked up to see a red dragon standing in front of them, shielding them from the snake. "RRRROARRRRR." The dragon roared fiercely at the snake. Flare was the dragon guarding the people. This was her. "I.is that AD. Dragon," a layperson stated. "How did it even get in the village?" A ninja inquired. "Is it protecting us? I'm not sure." The snake rose once more, hissed at Flare, flashed its razor sharp fangs, and lunged toward her. Flare snarled at the snake and lunged forward, sending wind bursting through her wings. Pog. Flares, I channeled my dragon energy into my tail, which glowed green, and charged at the serpent. Dragon arts. Dragon tail. The snake was in front of me when I quickly spun around, slamming my tail into it and forcing it back into a few stores. I hope Naruto won't be upset with me for destroying some stuff during our fight. I pondered in my mind. Honestly, I don't think Naruto will become enraged. Knowing him, I knew he would be more concerned about my safety than the amenities. I exhaled. He may not be a dragon, but he certainly possesses the characteristics of one. His loved one always comes before himself. But why does he seem to care about me? Despite the fact that we had only been friends for a month, I taught him some dragon arts for his training. My senses suddenly snapped, and I quickly shot skyward to avoid running into the second snake that had appeared. There was one more. I considered there was movement, and I noticed a second snake approaching the other two. The three snakes, who had just given me a hard slap, had hissed and were staring at me with narrowed eyes. You have to be joking with me. With a growl, I charged the three snakes. A snake lunged towards me, opening its jaws to attack, but... Snap. When the snake's sharp fangs made contact with my skin, they broke in half, and I couldn't help but smile inside. Regretfully, They find it difficult to pierce my dragon's skin. In retaliation, I gave the snake a hard bite on the neck, threw it skyward, and then used my claw to pierce its body. With a puff of smoke that vanished, the snake burst, leaving the other 2 snakes to deal with. 1 down, 2 to go, was my thought as I prepared myself after landing. I slapped my tail and the snake came at me, encircling me with its body so that I could not move. I attempted to free myself, but the other snake saw an opportunity and charged at me as well, wrapping its body around my neck and restricting my airflow. Oh no! Due to oxygen deprivation, my eyes were becoming too heavy to stay open. Just as they were about to close, I heard explosions all around me. Peering through a small opening, I was shocked to see the ninjas I had saved tossing some paper. Tipped kunai towards the snake on my neck, which exploded upon contact. The detonation sufficiently dislodged the snake's hold around my neck for me to bite into its body and launch it in a different direction. As I directed my dragon energy throughout my body and gazed down at the snake that was still encircling my body, heat began to surround both the snake and me. Dragon arts. Raging flames. Then, my entire body caught fire. Fortunately, I was unharmed, but I was unable to say the same for the serpent that had unwrapped me after it caught fire and was now lying on the ground. It eventually ceased to move and vanished in a cloud of smoke, leaving only the final snake to contend with. Time to finish this, I yelled as I hurried over to the serpent. I grabbed the snake with my jaws and began to fly up before it could react. The snake attempted to escape, but I stopped him in midair as I launched him skyward and concentrated my dragon energy. Dragon arts. Morning star. I inhaled deeply before releasing a massive ball of fire that turned into a star and was thrown in the direction of the snake, making contact. Boom. My attack caused a massive explosion that shook the entire village. Third, Paw of the shockwave required all civilians and ninja to prepare themselves. Whoa. What destructive power. Flare cracked as it hit the ground. With that, she raised her head and gave a triumphant roar to the sky. Ruer. Flare's body began to glow, and then it vanished, leaving the ninja and civilians wondering where she had gone. They were unaware that she actually changed into her human form rather than truly disappearing. Whoa. Although it wasn't as good as my battle with Naruto, that fight was still enjoyable, Flame uttered. The sound of something falling confused Flare at that point. What's that sound? Flare gritted her teeth in agony as something pierced her arm just then. Ah. What the hell? As she turned to see what had pierced her, Flare spoke. She was startled to find that only a small portion of the snake's fang had penetrated her skin. She moved swiftly to remove the fang. What? How did you wait? Flare spoke, but then she recalled the snake that had attempted to pierce her but was unsuccessful because of her dragon skin. Could it be that the chipped fang went up with me when I threw it in the air? If that's the case, however, how high did it go before it could partially pierce my skin? Flare said, tossing the fang aside while glancing at it. Whatever. The fang only went a little bit in my skin so I don't have to worry about being poisoned, Flame uttered. Well. I wonder how their fights are going. TCH, Orochimaru growled, gritting his teeth. This was not the intended course of events. He thought as he turned to face the locations of his 3 snake summons, but he was unprepared for a real dragon to show up and obliterate his serpents. He had planned for this invasion to be the day he killed Hiruzen by imprisoning him behind a barrier and wreaking havoc on the village with his snakes, but he hadn't counted on Jiraiya and the dragon to stand in his way. Clad in his shinobi battle gear, Hiruzen yelled, "That's enough, Orochimaru. Stop this madness." Jiraiya was standing next to him, facing downward. Jiraiya asked, "What do you gain from doing all this?" Orochimaru smirked as he turned to face the two, still holding that secret. Orochimaru laughed and said, "That's for me to know, and you two to find out. That being said, it's a little unfair that it's 2 against 1, don't you think?" he went on. Jiraiya asked as he was getting ready with his sensei, "What are you planning?" Orochimaru gestured and said, "I'm just going to even the playing field a little bit." "Oh no you don't," exclaimed Hiruzen, tossing a shuriken before making some additional hand gestures. Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu. That single shuriken multiplied into several and headed directly in Orochimaru's direction. Summoning Jutsu. Reanimation. With a slam of his hands, Orochimaru blocked the incoming projectiles with 2 coffins that shot out of the earth. "But those are..." Jiraiya became aware. Hiruzen screamed at his former pupil, "Orochimaru! You dare desecrate the past cages of this village!" Orochimaru exclaimed, "Ah, so, you know of this jutsu. Then you already know that you have no chance against me. Now for the third." as a third coffin began to emerge from the earth following his words. "We need to stop that third one at all costs," Hiruzen exclaimed to Jiraiya, who nodded. He moved behind his sensei and rested an arm and a portion of his chakra on his shoulder. Hiruzen stopped the third coffin from rising by making a hand gesture and channeling more chakra. The third coffin ceased to rise and remained in its original position before starting to descend once more. Jiraiya sighed and said, "We've managed to stop it." Hiruzen gave that a nod. "Looks like the third one failed, huh? Oh well," Orochimaru said with a sly smile. "No matter, all." Orochimaru's thoughts were interrupted by excruciating pain throughout his whole body and then froze up. A dark menacing aura surrounded Orochimaru as he fell on his hands and knees. This shocks Jiraiya and Hiruzen, who were unaware of the third coffin that stopped before it could completely submerge where it came from and the shadowy aura that surrounds him. "Lord Orochimaru!" exclaimed Saken, one of the 3 sound ninja who maintained the barrier. He and the other 2 were taken aback by their leader's abrupt change. Saken also had short dark blue hair. As they both charged at the unconscious Orochimaru, not realizing what was happening to him, Jiraiya exclaimed, "Now's our chance, sensei," and Hiruzen nodded. Just as they were about to approach him, a surge of darkness shielded him, pushing Hiruzen and Jiraiya back a short distance. Hiruzen struck his head first and then fell onto his back, but he was still conscious as Jiraiya fell heavily onto his back with a grunt. What is going on with me?" Orochimaru thought as he made an unsuccessful attempt to stand up. A quiet, dark, and menacing voice filled Orochimaru's head, saying, "I hope you don't mind. But I'm going to borrow your body and mind for a bit." "Who are you?" he inquired. Again, the voice said, "Ha ha ha, you don't need to know that. You're just my puppet to do my bidding right now." Orochimaru felt his conscience slip away. The voice concluded with a sly laugh, "Besides, his presence is close. Very close at that. You don't stand a chance against him. Now, enough talking. It's time to have a little reunion." Orochimaru began to be encircled by dark energy, which appeared as a dense layer of purple mist or fog, depending on your perspective. As this was going on, Hiruzen and Jiraiya gathered their thoughts and observed what was happening to Orochimaru. Because they were both so preoccupied with Orochimaru, the third coffin eventually reached the top and started to open, revealing a glimpse of yellow hair along with the other 2. Scene alteration. Using his wings to soar through the air, Kirin dispatched any opposing ninjas that got in his way while wielding the Sword of Darkness. When he returned to the village while flying, he saw chaos and devastation below. Destroyed buildings, ceaseless combat, innumerable casualties, and countless injuries. Similar to that day, Kirin mused to himself. When Kirin noticed Flare assisting the civilians and Leaf Ninja, she turned to face him. They locked eyes, and when Kirin nodded, signaling that everything was going well for her, he nodded in return. Swoosh. Kirin stopped in midair, stunned, sensing a familiar wave of dark power emanating from the place he was meant to be. The barrier separating Jiraiya and Hiruzen was bursting at the seams with dark power as he looked to where it was coming from. Kirin narrowed his eyes. He had felt this kind of power before, but he couldn't recall who it belonged to. "Where have I sensed this strength?" he contemplated. Kirin was shocked to find himself free of his thoughts as dense purple fog began to engulf the barrier's interior. Kirin dismissed the idea with a shake of his head, realizing that entering the barrier would be the only way to discover to whom that power belonged. He prepared for a possible fight as he flew straight towards it. Scene alteration. Hiruzen and Jiraiya gazed at the 3 individuals, or perhaps I should say living corpses, in front of them, but their attention was focused on one in particular. Hashirama Senju, one of the living corpses, uttered, "It's been a long time, Saru." While Jiraiya continued to focus on the corpse in front, Hiruzen shifted his attention to Hashirama and the other corpse next to him. Hiruzen noticed his student twitching a little, but he couldn't hold it against him. "Yeah, it has, Sarutobi, you've gotten pretty old," declared Tobirama Senju, the second corpse. "Yes, although, it would have been nice to see you 2 again, but I would like it to be in a better position than this one," Hiruzen said, narrowing his eyes and nodding. Tobirama turned to face himself and said, "Yes, it appears that the very jutsu that I had forbade anyone from using was what summoned us. The reanimation jutsu, Sarutobi, does this mean we're being forced to fight you and your student?" Hashirama turned to Tobirama and asked, turning to Jiraiya who was still staring at the third coffin in front of the 2. Tobirama walked forward and said, "It seems we were not the only ones summoned back, Hashirama." He then turned to face Jiraiya and finally the third coffin. Hashirama also moved forward to observe if anyone else had been brought back to life in addition to his brother and himself. The pair turned to see the third living corpse. A man about their height with spiky yellow, blonde hair who was dressed in a Jonin vest with a plain blue shirt underneath. Over it he wore a white cloak with red flames on the bottom and red letters reading, "Fourth Hokage," on the back. "Fourth Hokage," murmured Hashirama. He looks young but yet he doesn't at the same time. I wonder how he died," Tobirama replied. As the third corpse started to emerge from the casket, Hiruzen turned to face it and revealed blue eyes. Along with Hashirama and Tobirama, Jiraiya and Hiruzen remained motionless during this to await the actions of the fourth Hokage. The fourth Hokage did nothing but stand there with his lifeless blue eyes staring at Hiruzen and Jiraiya. Tobirama remarked, "Not much of a talker, huh?" while he examined the fourth. Minato. Jiraiya asked himself as he approached the fourth, who was now going by the name Minato. Before Jiraiya could get too close to Minato, Hiruzen put a hand on his shoulder to stop him. Hiruzen started to speak, but she was sidetracked by the approaching purple fog that was building up inside the barrier. "Hold on Jiraiya, we don't." Glancing around, Hashirama asked, "What's happening now?" A dark energy suddenly surrounded the three living corpses and began to levitate them. A murky giggle echoed through the mist as Hiruzen and Jiraiya turned to see who was causing it. Hiruzen cried out, "Who's there? Express yourself." Jiraiya continued. Then, behind the three corpses, a figure surrounded by the purple fog materialized. Everything was completely blurry, with the exception of the figure's two glowing green eyes. Gazing at the three living corpses, the figure remarked, "You three would do just fine." The three were engulfed in darkness as it began to encircle them. Jiraiya squinted at the figure, saying, "What are you doing to them?" The figure laughed and said, "You'll find out soon enough." Then, as the three looked down and slowly descended to the ground, the dark energy vanished from them. Hiruzen and Jiraiya remained motionless, pondering their disappearance. They raised their heads without saying anything, gazing at Hiruzen and Jiraiya with bright red eyes and a sinister aura surrounding them. The figure said, "There, that will keep you occupied." Earlier than the three controlled corpses were able to move. Hiruzen and Jiraiya watched to see what happened as the smoke blew past them through a tear in the barrier's side. "Kirin!" Jiraiya exclaimed, startling Hiruzen, who then turned to look at Kirin. Hiruzen questioned, "So that's Kirin?" while examining him. As Kirin's black wings flailed, a few red feathers dropped from his hovering body. When Kirin called Jiraiya's name, he ignored him because all that was on his mind was the figure shrouded in purple smoke. He was staring down at her with his own glowing emerald green eyes, peering through the smoke. The first and second Hokage did nothing but stare as the three corpses turned to face Kirin. On the other hand, the fourth gradually produced a kunai, but this one was specially designed. Instead of having just one blade, it had three, and the handle bore a seal. Then he vanished in a flash of yellow, partially blinding Jiraiya and Hiruzen. He reappeared in front of Kirin, who was taken aback, not by how quickly the fourth had appeared, but also by how strikingly similar he looked. Blue eyes and fiery yellow. Blonde hair akin to the sun. As Kirin used his sword to deflect a kunai slash and turned to face Jiraiya, he thought, "He looks just like Naruto. Is he possible to be?" The voice of the cloaked figure interrupted him just as the fourth was about to continue. "Stop. He's mine." Minato briefly met Kirin's gaze before teleporting quickly back to the ground. Kirin glanced at the figure, then back at Minato. Kirin asked the figure, more like demanded, "Who are you?" "Oh, what a shame, and here I was hoping you'd figure it out already," the figure replied. "Not to worry, you'll know who I am soon enough. Prince of Darkness," the figure continued. Kirin's eyes widened as the figure finished speaking. "How?" he contemplated. As the figure raised its hand, smoke shot in Kirin's direction. He responded by raising his sword in front of him, which quickly began to spin and drive the smoke away. Then, ready to strike, Kirin charged at the figure while brandishing his sword. The figure raised his hand, summoned a sword from the smoke, charged at Kirin, and their swords collided in the center. In the meantime, Hiruzen and Jiraiya were preoccupied with their own conflict with the previous Hokage. They were finding it challenging. The Hokage's selection was not for nothing. Hashirama was treating the teacher and the pupil in his renowned wood style. The fourth was teleporting left and right in a yellow flash to get to them while Tobirama was using his superior water affinity against them. Returning to Kirin, he flew about, averting or deflecting incoming blasts of dark energy that were directed at him. Then Kieran directed dark energy toward his sword and swung it, sending a dark slash toward the figure. The figure said, "How foolish," and returned the dark slash with a backhand. The figure was immediately in front of Kieran, who sent it reeling back to the side of the barrier with a right hook to the face and a powerful kick to the stomach. Kieran didn't slow down, channeling his evil energy into his blade to deliver another devastating blow that connected with its target and produced a small explosion. "Ah!" the figure exclaimed, then composed itself again. The figure said, "He taught you well, however, it won't be enough to take me down," before vanishing into the smoke. Glancing around, Kieran exclaimed, "Who are you really? You obviously know about me and where I'm from?" The figure shot a blast of dark energy at Kieran and said, "I know a lot more than that. I know you started to get into it with her." His eyes narrowed. "What are you getting at?" he asked. With his sword, he cut and threw every projectile that came his way. The figure stood in front of Kieran and used chains made of darkness to hold him together. Our two kingdoms were meant to fight each other until one of us went down and the other left standing, breaking the balance completely. Kieran sprang free from the chains and charged at the figure, saying, "But because of our constant war, innocent people kept dying between us over and over for nothing." The figure said, "Yeah, that's true, there's no getting around that, but sacrifices needed to be made," then stepped aside to launch purple fireballs the size of kunai at Kieran. "If our kingdoms united from the beginning to maintain the balance, that wouldn't have to happen," Kieran countered, dodging and slicing through most of the fireballs, though one slightly scraped his cheek. "One way or another, there was always going to be something that was going to tip the scale between us. I also know about that little promise you made to her," the figure replied. At that Kieran froze, gazing wide-eyed at the creature. It was aware of the commitment he had made to Iris, however, how? Kieran muttered in shock, How do you know about that?" "That doesn't matter, but you should have known that the promise between you two couldn't be kept." Kieran tightened his sword clenching and narrowed his eyes, "That's only because." Kieran was interrupted by the figure as she continued, "I was in your way, right?" Kieran's eyes widened as he finally realized who this person was. The one who had pursued his beloved and only brought chaos and destruction to his people. "How? You should be," Kieran muttered, trailing off. When Kieran took a closer look at the figure, despite the smoke shrouding it, he saw that it resembled a certain snake Sanin. Kieran understood and remarked, "Now I see." With a playful expression, the figure said, "It seems you finally understand." Kieran inquired, "Why are you here? You know how much this brings back memories of that day?" The figure said, snubbing Kieran's inquiry. The figure laughed as he remained silent in response. "Never. Ending conflict, suffering, loss, devastation, and chaos. Were you really under the impression that the conversation would end with a simple promise? That's pointless if you would just. Don't worry if you think I'll turn to your methods of thinking." Kieran cut the figure off, saying, "I'm still planning to keep my promise and bring peace like we strived for." "Are you serious? Even if you've already failed?" The figure spoke, causing Kieran to wince. What are you saying?" Kieran uttered. "Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. You failed," stated the figure. Kieran said nothing, simply lowering his head and covering his eyes with his hair. The figure continued, unaware that a purple smoke was beginning to engulf him. "You failed to unite our kingdoms. Thump. You failed to put an end to the war. Thump. You failed to save those kids. Thump. You failed to keep your promise. Thump." The figure vanished and then reappeared behind Kieran, nearly completely obscured by the purple smoke. "You even failed her. Thump. You failed to protect her. Thump. You failed to conserve her. Thump. You. All right, Iris, perish." Kieran was motionless and lost in thought despite the purple smoke completely enveloping him and leaving him in complete darkness. Rewind. With a distressed look on his face, Kieran was flying at top speed above the clouds in a specific direction. Please don't let me arrive too late," he pondered. Kieran swiftly increased his speed as he noticed an island being engulfed by darkness in the distance. There was a massive group of monsters in Kieran's path, and his eyes narrowed. "Move aside from me," he uttered those words and swung his dark sword. With ease, that single swing destroyed a great deal of the monsters. Moaner. Kieran saw the island with the Kingdom of White in the distance, and he saw the island tearing itself apart, with a bright light emanating from a tower in the middle. Kieran muttered, "No," and attempted to accelerate. He didn't stop once he reached the island, or what was left of it, his heart pounding and his sword clenched tight. He went to the central tower as the island was collapsing. He noticed that a portion of the tower was missing and that someone was lying down there. He whispered, "Iris." Just as Kieran turned to face her, she felt a crack in the floor beneath her and started to fall. "Nah, Iris," Kieran yelled. Iris opened her eyes, and as soon as she saw Kieran flying in her direction, her eyes widened. "Oh no. My beloved." Tears were forming in Iris's eyes as she stared at Kieran. Some of them fell from her face too, making Kieran's heart stop. "I'm sorry," Iris said in a sad tone as she continued to fall. "I gave my word, but I couldn't keep it," she added and held out her hands at Kieran, who was trying desperately to catch her. At that moment, she was beginning to fade into the debris and ash, but not before she sent Kieran a farewell grin and spoke those words. Before being completely engulfed by the debris, she said, "I love you, goodbye." "Iris, hold on." "No," before being engulfed by the debris as well, Kieran yelled. Back-end flash. Whoosh. The burst of power emanating from Kieran himself dispersed the purple smoke that had consumed him. "Oh no, what?" The figure flew back a few meters after being startled, then stopped and narrowed its eyes to look at Kieran. Kieran raised his head, eyes blazing as his pupil contracted into slits, and glared at the figure as an aura of red and black surrounded him. He, did I really touch someone?" The person laughed. Kieran's fist tightened and his eyes narrowed. "You created a large error." Kieran let out a growl. "And now, you will pay a lot." Kieran screeched, his aura igniting, and he charged at the figure, catching him off guard with a punch that went straight to his face. Kieran did not stop there. His punch carried him and the figure all the way to the other side of the barrier, completely shattering it. It was evident when the barrier broke because all of the purple smoke inside was released into the atmosphere. "What was that?" Jiraiya said, surveying his surroundings, but he quickly pulled out a kunai to stop some shuriken from getting to Hashirama. "Jiraiya, pay attention." As he built a wall of mud to protect himself and his students from an approaching tidal wave, Hiruzen remarked, "They're still coming." "I understand that." After saying this and kicking Hashirama, Jiraiya turned to face the object once more. "Minato, where are you?" Scene alteration. Kieran and the figure continued to fly until they collided with the Hokage monument. Both of them maintained their balance as Kieran attempted to slash him with his sword. Because the figure moved quickly, it was only able to block 2 of the slashes with its arms. However, on the third attempt, it grabbed Kieran's arm and threw him to the ground, causing it to crack. Kieran kicked the figure hard in the back, sending it flying once more, and swept its legs, causing it to stumble for a short while. The figure then descended, sending Kieran flying in its direction as its aura erupted and it launched purple flames in Kieran's direction. Kieran sidestepped each one and continued charging toward the figure. The figure also stopped shooting purple flames and charged, colliding in the center. After that, they were everywhere. Some of the ninja in the village could see clashes of purple and black after that, causing shockwaves as they collided. After that, they broke apart, and as the fight wore on, Kieran noticed that the fog surrounding it started to thin out and reveal Orochimaru. He raised his sword, and flames started to encircle him and his weapon. Darkness's flames ascend and consume the light. Kieran lunged ahead, thrusting, sending a jet of flame in the direction of the figure. The figure murmured, "So he did teach you that," and directed a powerful gust of wind directly at the flame stream, causing it to swirl and eventually vanish. At that moment, Kieran charged at the figure so quickly that it was unable to avoid the sword strike, slashing a deep wound in its right side. Oh no. With that, the figure unleashed a massive burst of dark energy toward Kieran, which he only marginally retreated with a sword block. Startled, the figure unleashed yet another volley of swift, dark energy at Kieran, who managed to avoid them all even at such a close range. Kieran was not done yet, as he teleported in front of the figure and brought his hands together channeling dark energy. He saw an opening and did an uppercut at the figure, sending it up in the air, followed by a hard roundhouse kick that sent him out of the village. The figure attempted to push back when Kieran unleashed his dark energy in a beam that struck it squarely. However, the figure was ultimately pushed back until it was outside the village. The figure was still entangled in the beam of dark energy when it hit the ground, causing a massive explosion. A massive crater was created, and in its middle stood a figure whose fog had nearly completely dissipated, leaving only an unconscious Orochimaru. Boom! Retraction of his wings. Kieran landed hard on the ground and started to walk towards the fallen figure, his eyes still narrowed. Before he could say anything, there was a yellow flash, and Kieran used his sword to stop a blow to the back before turning to see the fourth Hokage, Minato, holding that unique kunai. Astonished, Kirin wondered, what is he doing here, as Minato disappeared once more in a flash of yellow. With a quick movement of his head, Kirin sidestepped a kick from him and sent Minato hurtling through the air with an upward kick that struck him in the chin. Laugh. The fourth burst into smoke and vanished from sight. Kirin narrowed his eyes and followed his instincts, jumping backward and avoiding a wave of shuriken. Once more, Kirin spread his wings and took to the air. In the meantime, there was another flash, and the fourth appeared in front of Kirin, holding a whirling ball of chakra. The Rasengan. Kirin thought to himself, I'm definitely going to have to talk to Jiraiya later. He channeled a spinning ball of dark energy of his own, pulling his hand back and thrusting forward, colliding both attacks together. When the two attacks collided, each attempting to overpower the other, a strong wind swirled around Kirin and the fourth. Kirin noticed that the man's Rasengan grew larger, indicating that he applied more chakra to his attack, and he was about to apply his own dark energy to do the same, but he stopped, startled by what he saw. The Rasengan's outer layer turned from blue to red, and its inner core changed from white to black as the dark energy of Kirin combined with the Rasengan. Not only does the new Rasengan look good, but Kirin can also feel that the power emanating from the now black and red Rasengan is even more powerful than before. He was fascinated by it. Kirin didn't think that his dark energy and chakra could mix together like this, but he was wrong. He might have to tell Naruto about this. Suddenly, he was startled out of his reverie when the new Rasengan began to spin even faster, exhibiting small sparks emanating from it. When Kirin's senses alerted him to the need to get away safely, he kicked Minato hard, sending him flying, and then flailed his wings forcefully, sending him flying back as well. The Rasengan transformed into something entirely different from what it was. It expanded to become enormous and was entirely black. Next. Boom. Thankfully, no one was nearby to be caught up in the massive crater created by the explosion that erupted from it. When the dust settled, Kirin saw Minato holding a second Rasengan in his right hand and a kunai in the other. However, Kirin was not alone. There were 4 more Minatos, each holding a kunai in one hand and a Rasengan in the other. One by one, they vanished in a yellow flash, until Kirin was encircled by nothing but yellow flashes. He closed his eyes and concentrated, not worrying at all, trusting his senses to lead him instead of his eyes if he couldn't see them. Before Kirin, a Minato materialized and threw its Rasengan at him. Without even opening his eyes, Kirin moved aside and stabbed the clone in the stomach, causing it to puff in smoke. Immediately after, 2 more clones emerged from the smoke, attempting to slit him with the kunai, but Kirin prevented that from happening by using the kunai to grab one of the clone's hands and using his momentum to kick the other clone aside, causing it to puff in smoke. Immediately after, he brought the other leg down into the clone he was holding on to, causing it to slam into the ground, disappearing in smoke. The final one materialized behind Kirin and attempted to thrust its Rasengan at him, but Kirin parried and the Rasengan struck the ground instead. The last of the clones vanished when Kirin snatched up his sword and stabbed it in the back. The true Minato emerged and prepared to strike Kirin as well, but ha! Kirin opened his eyes and unleashed a powerful aura that pushed Minato back a considerable distance. Kirin then materialized in front of Minato and bound him with his dark energy. After Minato had made futile attempts to move, Kirin turned to face the figure that was still motionless in the crater and approached it. What? Why am I unable to move? The figure tried to move itself and said. Kirin said, glancing at the figure, it's because you reached the limit. That's not possible, I still have. The figure began, then stopped. I don't mean you, I meant that body you're possessing. Kirin responded by cutting it off. It's been exposed to so much dark energy, that the body has suffered some permanent damage. Just look at the arms. Kirin continued. The figure peered down at the body it possessed and noticed that both of the arms were fading to a blue-gray hue, almost as if they were rusting. Those arms are useless now, you won't be able to use them, nor will the one you possessed will either, Kirin said. The figure sighed after a brief period of silence. The figure said, almost disappearing, this isn't over, not yet. This is just the beginning. When I come back I'll finish what I started. Kirin's expression growled. You can try, but we'll stop you again, like before. It's not going to be like last time, I'll kill you and the queen. Properly, Kirin said, to which the figure laughed. There was only an unconscious Orochimaru left after the smoke that had been on the Sannin disappeared. After giving Orochimaru a quick glance and preparing to bind him, Kirin was momentarily blinded by a flash of white, but it was enough time for Kirin to realize that Orochimaru had vanished from his current location. Someone had to have taken him in the instant I lost my vision. It makes no difference, he is no longer able to use his arms. He wouldn't likely pose much of a threat. Still, though, Kirin murmured to himself. When Kirin heard a noise, he turned to see a coffin emerge from the ground behind Minato, who was still bound. Kirin's eyes didn't leave Minato. Kirin gave Minato a brief glance before turning to fly away in the direction of the village, but... Hold on. Kirin turned around to see Minato getting ready to be placed in the coffin and go back to the afterlife, where he belongs, but he spoke again, shocking Kirin even more. Kirin froze in shock, not sure why. Kindly. Be careful. Of my son. With all of his remaining strength, Minato hurled the unique three-bladed kunai at Kirin, letting it fall at his feet. Kirin studied it for a moment, then turned back to face Minato. Just as he was about to respond, Minato revealed a name that took him by surprise even more. Naruto. Kirin thought in disbelief. Naruto. He knows of Naruto. How? Wait, he said his son. Does that mean? As he turned to face Minato and saw that the man was being placed in a coffin. Hold on. Kirin heard one last thing from Minato, but it was too late. The coffin was closing when he said this. Minato said, I entrust him to you, and the coffin closed fully, allowing him to start his journey back to the afterlife. Kirin looked in shock at the location of the coffin because, as far as he knew, Naruto had always been an orphan. However, he had recently learned that he had a father, a revelation that had been suspended because, while the man's appearance did resemble Naruto, sans the whisker marks. This could just have been a coincidence. Regardless, he was going to speak with Jiraiya about this matter seriously. Then, looking at the kunai by his feet, Kirin debated whether or not to take it. After all, if the man was truly Naruto's father, why would he toss the kunai at him? Kirin took it, gave it a quick inspection, and then put it away for the time being. Then he launched himself into the air and began to fly toward the village. After a short while, he saw Jiraiya, a few masked ninjas, and Hiruzen, who was lying face up and motionless on the ground. Kirin's eyes widened and he accelerated. As he landed next to Jiraiya, the masked ninjas surrounded him and pulled out their kunai at once. Who are you? One person made a demand. Do you accompany them? Someone else growled out. As Jiraiya prepared to defend Kirin from the Anbu, Kirin moved his arm as though swiping something, and the ninjas fell to the ground motionless. Wait, hold on, Jiraiya said. Jiraiya asked, what happened to them? Glancing at Kirin, who was staring at his sensei. It's all right. Jiraiya nodded and sighed as Kirin continued. I just wiped their memories of their interaction with me of this moment, they should wake up soon. Please explain that to me, Kirin said, pointing to Hiruzen's motionless form. Kirin nodded and sighed with relief as Jiraiya reassured him, saying, don't worry, sensei's fine, he just got knocked out from a strong blow to the head by the first Hokage. By the way, that's great. After this is over, you and I are going to have a serious conversation, Kirin remarked. How about it? Jiraiya inquired, though he was fairly certain of what it was. That man resembles Naruto. A walking corpse with blue eyes and yellow hair. Don't you know who he is? Kirin remarked, after all, you said that Naruto resembles your former student. Jiraiya didn't say anything and turned to face his sensei. Jiraiya looked at Kirin in disbelief as he continued, he even told me something as well. He said something? What was said by Minato? Jiraiya inquired. Minato? That must be his name, Kirin pondered. Jiraiya sighed and nodded in agreement as Kirin said, now's not the time, like I said we'll talk when this is over. Right now Hiruzen needs medical attention. Kirin was following them, making sure no one attacked them, as Jiraiya quickly lifted up Hiruzen and started heading toward the hospital with the Anbu that had just woken up. Kirin was lost in thought at the moment, going over what the figure had said. Rewind. This is not yet finished. This is just the beginning. I'll finish what I started when I return, the figure said, vanishing almost completely. Kirin's expression became angrier, but just like before, we'll stop you again. It's not going to be like last time, I'll kill you and the Queen of Light. Properly, Kirin said, to which the figure laughed. Back-end flash. Kirin clenched his fist, the figure's words echoing in his mind. He was not going to let that happen. He was not going to fail this time. No one was going to hurt his beloved, not again. I'm not going to let that happen, I'll make sure of that. ... King of Darkness. Scene alteration. Just. To what extent are they proceeding? Sakura, wheezing a little, questioned. It's hard to tell, they seem to be speeding up, Pakun responded. In their attempt to reach Sasuke, Naruto, Chakra, Yukino, and Sakura were jumping from tree to tree with Kakashi's ninja dog Pakun. They encountered some difficulties along the way, including a sand ninja named Kankuro and his puppet, but fortunately Shino was present. Shino still wanted to take on Kankuro, and this gave him the opportunity to do so. With a hint of worry, Yukino said, I hope everyone's alright. Then Naruto concentrated, reassuring him, don't worry, they can handle themselves. Naruto asked himself in his head, Chakra, how long do you think we'll catch up to Sasuke? I'm not sure, at the speed we're going it's hard to tell, Chakra said, poking her head out from under Naruto's jacket. If it was just Yukino and us, we would have arrived there by now, but, she continued, turning to face Sakura and Pakun. After giving it some thought, Naruto concluded that it would be simpler to catch up if he and Yukino continued on ahead of schedule. Naruto looked at Sakura, who was gasping for air and losing ground. If this continues, she won't last very long, he concluded after giving it some thought. Unexpectedly stopping on a branch, Naruto startled Yukino, Sakura, and Pakun, causing them to stop as well. What is wrong with Naruto? Yukino inquired. Surprising the group, Naruto said, Yukino, me, and you are going ahead while Sakura stays and rests a bit. What? However, what are you trying to say? I don't require sleep. In denial, Sakura uttered, I'm fine. You're not, Naruto said, shaking his head, you're starting to breathe heavily and even started falling behind. It will be challenging to catch up to Sasuke if we keep going in this manner. Thus, remain here, take a little nap, and then follow us, Naruto continued. With that, Naruto waved his hand and one of his clones materialized. After giving it some thought, Pakun nodded his head. I'll leave my clone here in case anything happens. Pakun. You're staying as well so you can guide Sakura to where we are, Naruto said. At first, Pakun was hesitant. All right, he said. Naruto was right. Sakura was growing weary and clenching her fist in frustration, but she was unable to say anything. Turning to face Yukino, Naruto said, let's go, Yukino. Yukino glanced at Sakura then turned back to Naruto and nodded. Once more, Naruto and Yukino started to advance, but much more quickly than before. It was quiet for a moment before Naruto's clone spoke up while Sakura, Pakun, and him were back together. Don't take it personally, if you would have continued then it would have taken more time to catch up to Sasuke. The replica replied. The clone continued, this way is preferable. Sakura merely nodded before getting comfortable. Returning with Yukino and Naruto. Are you of the opinion that leaving Sakura there was appropriate? Yukino inquired. It will only impede our progress towards Sasuke. She needs to rest. In addition, my clone is already there and will defend her in the event of an enemy, Naruto remarked. It's not like we're leaving her to die, he continued, causing Yukino to wince and slightly shake her head in agreement. When Naruto noticed Yukino flinch, he was taken aback and didn't know what he had just said. I apologize. Disregard what I just said. Naruto apologizes for the way that came out. No, it's okay, I get it, Yukino shook her head. After that, there was an awkward silence, and Naruto could see that she was still affected by what she had done to him. Chakra gave him a quick glance as she peered out from under Naruto's jacket. She then gestured to Yukino, who was scowling, as though to comfort her. With a start, Naruto turned to face Yukino and placed a hand on her head, forcing her to turn to face him. Naturally, Yukino calmed down. Whenever she felt depressed, Naruto would reassure her by placing his hand on her head, as he is doing now. I might not be able to forgive you for what happened, Yukino. But please know that you are still important to me. If you would like to talk, I'm available whenever you need me, Naruto said, trying to smile at her the way he used to, but he just couldn't. What they did. What she did left a scar deep in his heart. He loved Yukino, and for her to do what she did left a type of damage that hurt far more than a kunai that went through any part of his body. He just hopes that his heart will mend itself over time, but he doubts that it will, hoping that something or someone can sew it back together. Wish he had known. Yukino smiled and smiled back at Naruto, holding back her tears. Softly, she said, thank you. She continued, you can talk to me too if you want. They went on, with Naruto nodding his head but saying nothing. A few minutes later, Chakra spoke to Naruto as well. You're almost there, but for some reason, they seem to stop, she remarked. Naruto nodded, all right, thanks Chakra, and accelerated. Yukino said, hey Naruto, She was also spending time. Yes. Are you? Are you able to teach me how to wield a sword? Hopeful, Yukino asked. Naruto was taken aback because he hadn't anticipated this kind of inquiry. What could be causing this sudden interest? As if genuinely curious, Naruto asked. All right, so. I would prefer something with some reach because I can't always rely on my chakra for everything, even though I have some kunai for close quarters. Like a sword, Yukino clarified. I was also inspired by the way you used your sword to cut down Neji at a close range. It inspired me to pick up a sword as well, Yukino remarked, her eyes gleaming with praise for Naruto. Startled, Naruto chuckled to himself, same old Yukino. Sure, when this is over, I can train you into using a sword, Naruto said, nodding his head. Then Yukino grinned broadly when Naruto promised to train her. He nodded as she said, thank you, Naruto. They both carried on, and a few minutes later, Chakra unexpectedly addressed Naruto. Naruto is just ahead of you, but he's stopped moving, she uttered. I wonder what happened that caused him to stop moving, Naruto said, nodding. When Yukino noticed Naruto's narrowed eyes, she became intrigued. What's not right? She inquired. Come on, something's not right. We need to move quickly, said Naruto, as he and Yukino accelerated. After walking through some trees for a few more minutes, they eventually saw Sasuke, but he was lying motionless on the ground with his curse mark activated. In addition, Gaara had changed drastically. He now had blue lines running along half of his face and arms, giving him the appearance of a monster. The 9. Tails stated, you might want to be careful, kid, as the transformation is about to begin. And whatever you do, make sure Gaara doesn't go to sleep, he continued. What would happen if he does? Inquired Naruto. He stated, then the children's consciences will alternate between the 1. Tails, Shukaku. So, if that occurs, all I have to do is wake him up. The 9. Tails stated, true, but it will be challenging because of the sand shielding him. At that, Naruto gave a nod. Sasuke barely had time to react as Gaara charged at him at that moment, staying motionless on the ground. Oh no, Sasuke. We will fail to succeed, Yukino exclaimed in fear and anxiety. After shocking Yukino with a sudden burst of speed, Naruto reappeared in front of Gaara. However, before he could attack Sasuke, he gave him a hard kick to the face, forcing him to retreat toward a tree. After landing, Naruto squinted his eyes at Gaara and gave her a growl, turning to face the blonde. Suddenly, he heard Yukino land next to Sasuke and inquired in a worried manner. How are you doing, Sasuke? Sasuke attempted to stand but was unable, so he turned to face Yukino and Naruto. Why you guys? He exclaimed, then gave a quick, pained grunt. You! Snarled Gaara. Sasuke grunted once more as he attempted to stand back up, and Naruto tensed at his tone, his guard up in case anything happened. Sasuke. Just hold on, Yukino said, making no attempt to console him. Then Gaara's gaze returned to Sasuke, who lunged forward at breakneck speed. Perish! Uchiha Sasuke! He yelled and charged at Sasuke. Just as Yukino moved to step in front of Sasuke to defend him, Naruto unexpectedly moved to the right of them, lifted his arm as though it were a shield, and a real black dot and dot red shield materialized from one of his metal devices on the right arm of his jacket, protecting Sasuke, Yukino, and himself from harm. Once again attempting to gain some distance, Naruto used his strength to push Gaara to the other side as he felt her collide with his shield. Then, as Naruto's shield reverted to its original form, the metal devices on his arm, he turned to face Yukino and Sasuke, asking them if they were alright. Yukino was taken aback by what had happened, and even though Sasuke was in excruciating pain, he couldn't hide his look of surprise. How are you two doing? Naruto inquired. Yukino nodded slightly, but Sasuke remained silent. She nodded, and Naruto turned back to look at Gaara, who was holding his head. Yes, thanks, Naruto, she said. Why? Gaara asked, and then there was a pause before he continued. Gaara repeated, why, confounding Naruto and the others. Why would you defend them? What do they mean to you? Gaara let out a growl. Naruto glanced at Yukino and Sasuke, who turned to face him in anticipation of his response. My childhood friend Yukino is my friend Sasuke. My teammate, I will not desert them. I'm going to protect Yukino no matter what because I value her so highly. Regarding Sasuke, I'll be there to support him when things get tough if he needs me. I refuse to flee, which is why, Naruto said, drawing his sword from its sheath, pointing at Gaara before driving it into the ground and giving her a death stare. As long as I'm here, as long as I'm still standing, you won't bring any harm to those who are precious to me, Naruto said. Yukino blushed as she looked at Naruto with more admiration. Sasuke and Temari, who was hiding, all had shocked expressions on their faces at what Naruto had just said. Chakra said abruptly, he's hurting, not just physically or emotionally, but mentally. Naruto gave Gaara a sympathetic glance before turning back to face Chakra. Naruto mumbled, he's just like me. Gaara began to tremble. Was it anger or pain? Naruto couldn't tell, but then she burst into a loud laugh that startled bystanders. My curiosity has been piqued, Naruto Uzumaki, it said. I am going to enjoy murdering you, Gaara continued, his other half now completely covered in sand. Naruto could relate to Gaara's expression when he saw it in her eyes. The paw of Naruto. This guy, who was treated cruelly and thrust into a destiny over which he had no control, had such lonely eyes. He was just like me. The people who gazed at me with those eyes made me hate them all. I didn't know who I was, and I wondered why I was so despised and why I was even here. Upon discovering that I possessed the nine-tailed fox within me, the villagers appeared even more callous. Alone and terrified of what they would do to me, I believed that death would have been the best thing for the world. However, rewind, hello. I was sitting alone on one of the playground swings when I heard someone call out to me after I was kicked out of the grocery store while trying to stock my apartment. I turned to see a stunning white-haired girl who was probably the same age as me. She was wearing a black sandal and a dark blue shirt with a skirt, and what surprised me was that she was grinning at me. I started looking around the playground because I thought she was talking to someone else, but I soon realized that the girl and I were the only ones there. I looked at myself, confused, as if to ask, you talking to me? The girl laughed and nodded, then walked over to the swing by my side. Why are you by yourself here? The young lady inquired. She might only be acting on her friend's dare after losing a bet, but I didn't know what to do because this was the first time anyone had ever had a conversation with me, much less a girl. Should I reply? Should I continue the conversation? Alternatively, perhaps she greetings? Is anyone present? She said, jolting me out of my reverie. She cocked her head to the side, waiting for me to respond, and I glanced at her. Silently, I uttered, it won't work. The girl didn't know what to think. What is not going to work? She questioned, perplexed. I gestured at her and me and said, this. You're probably just talking to me cause you lost a bet or someone dared you to talk to me, I responded. I turned around to see her smiling at me, but she stopped me dead in my tracks when she suddenly grabbed the hem of my shirt. I only came here because I wanted to play on the swings, and then I saw that you were here and decided to talk to you, the child clarified. I became even more perplexed. Doesn't she recognize me? Are you unaware of who I am? I inquired. The girl was perplexed and put her fingers to her head to consider it. After a short while, she gasped and gave me a wide-eyed stare. I closed my eyes, expecting her to say something harsh, like, get away from me, or, don't talk to me anymore. That's unbelievable, the young woman uttered. It's finally here. You're the one who always plays practical jokes on the people, don't you? When I opened my eyes, she was pointing at me, she said. This surprised me because, ordinarily, every parent in the village would advise their child to avoid hanging around with me. Well, yes, that's me, I said, causing her eyes to brighten. Whoa. That's you. I've always wondered how you pull off your practical jokes without getting discovered, she remarked. You. Are you amused by my tricks? I sat down on the swing and said. The girl nodded and started asking me questions about my practical jokes, to which I responded to each one. At this point, I was joining in on the conversation, so I asked her which of my practical jokes was her favorite. Ah, without a doubt, the painting on the Hokage monument was the one you did. The girl laughed and said, you had some guts to do that. It was funny seeing the old man's face as he saw it. I chuckled too. Yes, that was also a favorite of mine. She nodded as I said, it was entertaining to see everyone's reactions as well. The girl said, I forgot to ask. What is it? With a smile, I said. What is your name? I totally forgot about it while we were conversing, she smiled. I froze, thinking that she must have heard about me from one of the civilians if her parents hadn't told her. I said, unsure of whether I should tell her my name. I don't know. Oh, I apologize. The girl said, I should introduce myself first, and she leapt from the swing to stand in front of me. My name is Kira Yukino. Nice to meet you, the girl, who was now going by Yukino, said, holding out her hand to greet me. Her name is Yukino. What a lovely name. I I was hesitant to shake hands with her, but I did so to make her smile even more. I got up and got ready to introduce myself, but nothing came of it. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. It's nice to meet you, I said, grinning every week. I waited for her to say something, anything at all. If Yukino treated me like an outsider, which I didn't think I could handle, then at least I was ready for what was about to happen. Her eyes widened when I said my name, as if she finally realized who I was. Yukino grinned again and remarked, "That's a nice name. I heard the way the civilians behaved and treated you. They said things like we shouldn't talk to you because it's in our best interests." Yukino continued, "That you bring misfortune." I lowered my head at that. I have no idea why they treat me this way, unless you count the practical jokes, which I doubt were the cause of it. However, I failed to see that. You're very kind, witty, and approachable. I'm not sure why the civilians dislike you or treat you the way they did, but I believe that if they spent more time getting to know you, they would have a different opinion of you, Yukino remarked. Yukino said, extending her hands once more, "So how would you like to be my friend?" Yukino wanted to be my friend in spite of everything that everyone had said about me, and she was different from everyone else, so I was surprised. No, dumbfounded. I didn't realize that tears were streaming from my eyes, and judging by the worried expression on Yukino's face, she might have misspoken. "What's amiss, Naruto?" She placed her hands on my shoulder and said, "I'm panicked." I wiped my tears from my eyes and shook my head. I mumbled, "Thank you." "Why?" Yukino inquired, perplexed. "I'm just happy that you gave me a chance and were the first to ask if I wanted to be their friend." "Thank you." "Thus, thank you," I said, giving her a hug. I abruptly stopped hugging Yukino, and when I unwrapped my arms from around her, I saw that she was frozen. "I apologize," I said. "I shouldn't have done that so quickly," and scratched the back of my head in concern that I might have gone overboard. "It's all right, you simply took me off guard, so you'd like to be pals?" Yukino inquired once more. I nodded and grinned at her. I thanked Yukino and replied, "Yes, I would like that." Back-end flash. When Yukino entered my life, she became my very first friend. I treasured our time together, so even though I can't forgive her for what she did, I will always be appreciative of her friendship. Following Yukino, individuals began to emerge, including Iruka, Sensei, Sakura, Sasuke, and Kakashi. Sensei, the Rookie 9, as well as Lee and his group. Even if the villagers hated me or regarded me with cold eyes, or even if the 9 tails resided inside me, I was no longer alone, so it was all right. The fact that people in my immediate vicinity still wanted me to be here with them in spite of my recent changes gave me a sense of relief. Being wanted, existing, and alive feels good, and I'm glad to have so many people in my life. But thinking back on the past terrifies me because I could have been the same as you, Gaara, if Yukino hadn't been there that day and I had stayed that way alone. That's precisely why I can relate to what you're going through. I'm not sure what exactly happened to you, but you've been suffering on your own since the beginning, with no one to help you escape the depths of your own despair. This time, though, I'll save you. I'll be the one to rescue you from the darkness within you, and once I do, I'll devour it to set you free. Pav 3. Now fight me. I thought you were worthy of death since you displayed the power in the preliminary rounds. Gaara grinned and said. After closing his eyes, Naruto inhaled deeply. Chakra, Naruto uttered. She gave a quick peek. Without taking his eyes off of Gaara, Naruto said, "Go by Yukino, she will protect you while I deal with him." "All right, but please exercise caution," she said, removing his jacket before approaching Yukino. With an evil smile on his face and his arms outstretched, Naruto took up his sword and hunched over, prepared for whatever Gaara would do. His body tensed and his eyes narrowed. Sand Shuriken. Gaara swung his arms, sending sand-based shurikens flying in the direction of Naruto and his group. In order to protect the two of them in the unlikely event that any of those shuriken come into contact with them, Yukino moved to stand in front of Sasuke and embraced Chakra. Havoc. When Yukino heard the sound of sword slashes, she spun around and was startled by what she saw. Every single shuriken aimed at them was being slashed by Naruto. His reaction time was lightning fast, and his movements were perfectly timed as he slashed the projectiles. A few of the shurikens passed them by and grabbed some wood as they struck the trees. The flurry of shurikens ceased. Gaara grinned, then burst out laughing. Very good, Uzumaki Naruto. Let's see how you can handle this now, Gaara uttered. When Naruto noticed that Gaara was taking in a lot of air, wind energy began to envelop his sword, turning it completely green. Wind style. Endless devastation from sandstorms. As promised, when Gaara let go of the stored energy, it was like a real sandstorm, heading directly in the direction of Naruto and his companions. Sword drawn, Naruto was ready to make his own move. Sword art. Tornado sword slash in wind style. When Naruto swung his sword as the sandstorm approached, the wind energy formed a large tornado that stopped the sandstorm's progress, shielding Naruto and his companions like a wall of wind. Naruto twitched a little as he saw a vision of Sakura and Pakun arriving at the area he is in, just as Yukino and Temari watched on in shock as the two attacks cleared and Naruto and Gaara stared at each other. What the heck? How am I? Kaizen. Naruto, Yukino, Chakra, Temari, and Gaara turned to face the shouter. Sakura and Pakun had arrived, but Naruto's clone was not with them. When Sakura saw Sasuke in that state, she became so alarmed that she lost awareness of her surroundings. When Gaara saw Sakura, he grinned evilly and opened his hand and stretched out his arm. Naruto responded instantly, using his speed to get close to Sakura and push her in the direction of Yukino, who grabbed her. Gaara then grabbed Naruto, dropping his sword and trapping him against a tree. Naruto. His voice stopped Yukino as she was about to go help him, shouting. Sakura, Yukino, Sasuke needs to leave right away. Naruto startled the girls by saying aloud. Why are you being mean? Gaara cut Yukino off as she was about to say, we're not. Sand Shuriken. Sand. Shurikens advanced on Yukino, but before she could move, Naruto surrounded his group with a black barrier, keeping them safe from the oncoming attack. Yukino, by yourself, you cannot defeat Gaara. In addition to having far more experience, the fact that the sand is shielding him doesn't help. Trying to escape, Naruto uttered, take Sasuke and Chakra and go with Sakura so he can get treated. Naruto, you can't be serious, Chakra told herself in her head. I'm not going to abandon you, never again, Yukino uttered. We can't defeat Gaara, Yukino, Sakura said, taking one of Sasuke's arms and putting it around her shoulder, and Sasuke needs to be treated. Are you really expecting me to abandon Naruto here, just as we did in the forest? Yukino glared at Sakura as well. In an attempt to talk her into it, Naruto said, Yukino, just go, I'll be fine. Nah, I'm not going to leave. Yukino's, just follow my instructions. Jeering at Yukino, Naruto yelled. With tears welling up in her eyes, Yukino turned to Sasuke and put his other arm around her shoulder, shocked and hurt by the tone Naruto had given her. She had never seen him yell at her before. Before heading out of the area with Sasuke and Sakura, Yukino took one last look at Naruto. Naruto let out a sigh. He didn't mean to yell at Yukino in that way, but he would have had to have apologized to her afterward, since all he wanted was for her and Chakra to be safe. As they were leaving, Gaara attempted to attack them, but Naruto levitated his sword to defend them, allowing his team to escape. With a serious tone, Naruto said, you better focus on me. Gaara laughs. Who's to say I won't pursue them after I'm done with you? Gaara inquired. You won't even get the chance, I'll stop you before that happens, said Naruto. Ha! A black aura suddenly burst around Naruto and he yelled. Naruto even managed to push Gaara a little bit back, but the wind was so powerful from his power burst that he was now free from her grip. Naruto took out his sword and charged at Gaara. When he attempted to swing again, Gaara blocked it, and the situation remained the same. In order to get a better distance, Naruto leapt aside and unleashed a blast of dark energy at Gaara. The layer of sand prevented most of the damage from being sustained. When Gaara turned around, Naruto swung his sword vertically, causing Gaara to scream in agony. Gaara had leapt at Naruto, but Naruto had flipped over him. Ah! Naruto struck Gaara's body with another sword swing, this time creating a red X. When sand began to accumulate in the wound he had caused Gaara, Naruto was taken aback slightly. Then, with a sly smile, Gaara punched Naruto. Naruto saw this coming and was able to block it with his sword, but the punch's weight sent Naruto flying in the direction of a tree. Oh my! Unsatisfied, Gaara made himself visible to Naruto and proceeded to use his arm covered in sand to fashion a blade out of sand. Naruto was able to block the blade with his sword, but it was still difficult for him to overcome Gaara because he was on top of him. Is it all you have? You displayed power in the preliminary round. Where is it now? I desired to murder you in your prime. Gaara continued to sneer at Naruto. I know you've suffered in the past, but I won't use my power against you. Naruto remarked, I see it in your eyes. Angry, Gaara exclaimed, shut up, as if you have any knowledge of me, he uttered. If you refuse to give it to me, I'll just make you use it, Gaara continued, grabbing Naruto by the leg and hurling him to the ground, creating a tiny crater in the process. Further infuriating Gaara, Naruto remarked, "I know a lot more than you may think. Quit talking." With a swing of his arm, Gaara yelled and threw some sand at him. Rising to his feet, Naruto ducked under the falling sand and climbed back up the tree. Naruto lunged towards Gaara, who reached out to seize him. However, Naruto was able to slightly seize the arm, move out of the way, and deliver a powerful kick to the side of Gaara's face. Gaara grinned as she flew backwards and saw that Naruto's sand arm had reached out to grab him again, holding him in place. "You're dead now." Gaara uttered those words and inhaled deeply. Cannon in sand. Naruto was left with no choice but to defend himself by raising his arms in a X form when Gaara opened his mouth, unleashing a powerful blast of sand that was unlikely to hurt him much despite his endurance training with flare. Naruto was anticipating being struck by the sand blast, but ice fashion. Reflective barriers. Naruto was surprised to see a wall constructed of ice mirrors in front of him, shielding him from the approaching sand. When Naruto turned to see where it originated, he saw Yukino approaching him while carrying Chakra on her shoulder. "Why are you in this place?" Naruto uttered for the moment. Yukino ignored him and gestured with her hands. Ice style. Chilling effect. When Yukino put her hands on the sand where Naruto was, the sand began to solidify and freeze. Before Yukino could say anything, Naruto used his strength to break free of the frozen sand, took her hand, and fled quickly so they were out of sight. "Why are you in this place?" Naruto inquired once more, hoping for a response. "I promised never to abandon you. Thus, I returned," Yukino replied. "I assured you that I was alright. Gaara is unbeatable. He's fought in more battles than you have. And why would you bring Chakra back to this place? It was your duty to keep her safe," Naruto uttered. "Chakra didn't want to go with Sakura when I told her I was going back for you, so she just stuck to me," Yukino replied. Wanting an answer too, Naruto turned to face Chakra over Yukino's shoulder, but Chakra just nodded, not wishing to break up the conversation. "That doesn't matter. Gaara is planning to kill me, and now since you're here he'll try and kill you as well," Yukino remarked. "All the more reason why I should be here. ... What? After a brief pause, Naruto spoke. "Oh, that wasn't the right way to say that." "Not giving in," Yukino remarked. "It doesn't matter because I'm staying here and I'm not changing my mind." "And see him attempt to murder you. Not taking place, proceed. Returning. Now," Naruto responded. "What if he treated you in the same way?" she said, becoming agitated. "At minimum, you would have remained secure and shielded," he responded, agitated as well. "You know who was supposed to keep an eye on you and make sure you were safe? I promised you I would be alright, but I'm afraid of what he might do to you." With the exception of Chakra, who merely observed with amusement, neither Naruto nor Yukino realized they were growing close to one another as they argued back and forth. "I just want you to be safe. Why are you being so stubborn right now?" Naruto uttered. "You want to talk to me about being stubborn when you're doing the exact same thing? I want you safe too. But for a good reason," he remarked. She added, "I also have a good reason." After that, Yukino and Naruto just continued to stare at each other without saying anything. Suddenly, they realized how close they were, and they quickly moved away from one another. Yukino's face turned bright red, and she turned her head away. Naruto blushed as well and turned to the side. Before Naruto spoke, there was some silence. "I apologize," he said. Turning to face him, Yukino opened her mouth to say something, but Naruto interrupted. "I'm mad at you for. You simply mean the world to me, and if something were to happen to you," he continued, pausing to avoid thinking about what he would do in the event that he lost Yukino. With a gentle smile, Yukino went to give Naruto a hug. "It's all right. All you were doing was following your own judgment. I feel the same way as well. You are very important to me, just as you are to me. You are capable of taking care of yourself, so I don't want anything bad to happen to you. However, it doesn't mean I'm not concerned," she remarked. After putting his arms around Yukino and drawing her in closer, Naruto allowed their foreheads to briefly touch. When Naruto withdrew from the embrace, Yukino pouted a little. Yukino nodded in agreement as Naruto stated, "Okay, we have to find a way to deal with Gaara." "Yes, but how can we proceed? Even Lee struggled when they fought, but his sand shields him from everything," Yukino remarked. Yukino was confused when Naruto said, "I'm not sure about that." "What are you trying to say?" she inquired. "You noticed his appearance, correct?" With a nod, Naruto questioned. When I was fighting him, his sand didn't react when I attacked or when I got near him, even when I slashed him with my sword. Yukino was surprised when Naruto replied. But the problem is the wounds I gave him were healed by the sand. As if nothing happened, Naruto continued. It's encouraging to know that his sand won't react when we approach, but the sand covering his body and the new healing factor you mentioned will definitely be an issue. Yukino nodded. There must be a vulnerability somewhere that we're not aware of, Yukino mused. Naruto considered it as well, recalling his battle with Gaara. He only attacked his front, which appeared to be the most protected area, failing to target his back, which is where the tail is located. Await the tail, he considered. Naruto, did you figure something out? Chakra inquired. Maybe. 9. Tails, do you think that's his weak spot? What if I attacked him from behind where the tail is? Naruto inquired. There were some sounds coming from Naruto's head. Naruto nodded mentally as 9. Tails responded, it would seem so, but I can't be sure. Try and aim for it and see what happens. If nothing does happen, it should still slow him down. Alright. Naruto turned to face Yukino, who was still ruminating on her. Yukino. Naruto interrupted her reverie, causing her to turn to face him. Yes. I believe I have identified his weak point. Can you assist me with a plan that I would like to try? Naruto inquired. Yukino nodded and grinned, saying, yes, I'll help you. So, what are your plans? She continued. Naruto started, saying, well, first. Skipping time. You understand everything? Yukino nodded as Naruto questioned. When Naruto had finished explaining his plan to Yukino, she had noticed how much he had changed and was clearly not the same Naruto as she had known in the past, but she also knew that nothing could ever make him any less of Naruto. I got it, she said. Alright then, let's go. When Yukino and Naruto emerged from hiding, they were met with a scowling Gaara. Chakra had already gone to hide in a nearby bush so she wouldn't be a hindrance. Emotionally charged, Gaara was about to kill his opponent when Yukino intervened. This marked the third time someone had meddled in his death. The first was Guy, who had shielded Lee during the preliminary rounds. The second was the hospital, where he attempted to kill Lee once more but was unsuccessful. And just now, just a few moments ago, Yukino had prevented Naruto from being killed by his attack. He glared at Yukino and said, I'm going to kill you for interfering with my kill. At the glare, Yukino stiffened slightly. She nodded when Naruto said, remember what we talked about, standing next to her. Then Yukino began to gesture with her hands. Ice look. Frosty mist. Yukino took a deep breath and let it fly, sending a mist that was cold and white that sparkled out of his mouth and toward Gaara. When the mist vanished, Gaara raised his arms and swung it in front of him to drive the mist away, believing that Yukino and Naruto had fled once more. Just as he was ready to track them down. Wham! When Gaara felt a sharp sensation in his stomach, he looked down to see Naruto with his fist firmly planted there. Gaara smiled and reached out to grasp Naruto's hand, but... wham! Surprised, Gaara looked up to see that Yukino had kicked him hard in the face, sending him flying upwards. Next, Naruto punched Gaara hard in the stomach, sending him flying even higher. Out of his darkness, Naruto created a chain that moved in the direction of Yukino. When she grabbed hold of the chain, he pulled on it, lifting her to her feet. He then grabbed her by the waist and flung her in the direction of Gaara. As she approached him, she gestured with her hands. Icicle chains in ice style. Ice chains erupted from Yukino's hands. She reached out and wrapped them around Gaara. Then she sent chains flying at Naruto, who grabbed one of the chains and dragged himself forward in Gaara's direction. With his darkness, Naruto created another set of chains that encircled Gaara. He glanced at Yukino, who returned the favor by nodding in his direction. At the same time, Yukino and Naruto used the chains to force Gaara to the ground. OMG! When they noticed that Gaara's tail and back were exposed, Yukino and Naruto seized the opportunity. Naruto's sword materialized in his hand, taking on a stance as flames surrounded it. After that, Yukino also grabbed Naruto's sword, and to her surprise, it started to change, turning its flames from red to a blue-white hue. The temperature around Naruto and Yukino began to change, but this did not surprise him. Kirin and Flare had informed him during his training with his sword and sword skills that he could combine attributes when performing sword skills, and he only needed a second person to do so because he was not yet strong enough to do it on his own. However, in this instance, Yukino was inadvertently combining her ice attribute with Naruto's fire energy. Naruto glanced at Yukino before focusing on her hand due to its white aura. This has to be her ice chakra, he reasoned. Shaking his head, Naruto concentrated. Are you prepared? As soon as Naruto spoke, Yukino nodded, emerging from her moment of surprise. Indeed, she answered. All right, let's begin. With that, Naruto raised his sword. Sword art. Rising Frostfire Blade, fire and ice combination. When they got close enough, Yukino assisted Naruto in bringing his sword down on Gaara. Gaara's back was severely cut, he even slashed his tail, splitting it in half. Naruto was correct, the weak point was the tail. Ah! Gaara let out a scream. As soon as the blue, white flames began to encircle Gaara, Naruto grabbed Yukino by the trash and leapt back to avoid being engulfed in the flames. Whoosh! After the explosion of flames and the white smoke that surrounded the area cleared, everything was covered in frozen ice, including Gaara, who was frozen solid. Gaara! Temari turned to face her brother and yelled at him. Did we cross a line? Yukino said to Naruto as well. Naruto answered, I didn't even know it would do that. Maybe it was because I combined attributes with Yukino, who lacks mana, and used chakra instead. Or was it because I put too much mana into my sword? Either way, I have to take note of this so it doesn't happen again. This is only my second time combining attributes, and I wouldn't want people getting hurt. Laugh. Naruto and Yukino swiftly turned to face the frozen Gaara. Laugh. Laugh. There were no sounds at all, save for the cracks that started to appear on Gaara's frozen body. Laugh. The nine. Tails exclaimed, move and get that girl out of there now. With lightning speed, Naruto grabbed Yukino and used his darkness to form a demonic hand that took Temari and dragged her away from Gaara. Huh? What on earth is this? Temari remarked, startled. What are you doing, Naruto? Yukino remarked, blushing from her close proximity to him. There's no time, boom. There was a huge burst of smoke where Gaara had been, and the wind from it carried some trees and Naruto and Yukino with it. Temari was safe because the demonic hand was still holding her, and Pakun and Chakra were barely holding onto a tree branch to avoid getting blown away by the wind. Chakra had no idea that sand was slowly making its way toward them. As the strong gust of wind carried them toward a tree, Naruto grabbed Yukino firmly and absorbed the full force of the blow, shattering the tree. TCH. Naruto gave a slight wince. Naruto, Yukino spoke anxiously. Naruto said, don't worry, I'm fine. Are you certain? He nodded as Yukino asked. A little bit of smoke still surrounded them, making it difficult for Naruto and Yukino to see clearly, so they got up. The first to look up was Yukino, who looked horrified as she hesitantly reached for Naruto's jacket, making him look at her before glancing in her direction. When the smoke cleared, Naruto was able to get a closer look at the enormous, glowing-eyed creature, which at first glance resembled a raccoon. However, upon closer inspection, he could see that it was made of sand, had one enormous tail, and dark blue markings all over its skin. The creature started speaking at that very moment, and Gaara's voice could be heard saying, excellent, excellent Naruto Uzumaki, you continue to give me such pleasure. When Naruto moved in front of Yukino, she was still gripping his jacket and preventing him from moving forward. Hold on, Naru. Ah, Yukino began, but as she felt Naruto yank her violently away, she cried out. When Naruto turned around, she saw that Yukino was trapped in the air by the sand. She attempted to break free, but the sand was all around her and would not let go. Yukino. Another shriek was heard, and Naruto's eyes widened and he started to move. Yeah. Naruto quickly spun around to find Chakra ensnared in the sand as well. Chakra? After being startled, Naruto gave Gaara a chilly glare. They have nothing to do with this, so let Yukino and Chakra go. Naruto yelled at Gaara. Naruto turned to face Gaara as soon as he heard her chuckle, lifted his arm, and gave his large hand a light squeeze. Ah! Naya! Chakra and Yukino both let out painful screams as the sand began to slowly crush them. With wide eyes, Naruto observed Yukino and Chakra, who were both wearing pained expressions. Naruto could feel Gaara smiling at him as she said, I have a better idea. How about you choose the one you want to save, and I'll kill the other one, how does that sound? Gaara continued, so, who is it going to be? Your childhood friend or the cat? Naruto remained motionless, unable to decide between Chakra and Yukino. For him, they were both too valuable to lose. With pain, Yukino uttered, N. Naruto. Mentally, Chakra told Naruto, don't worry about me, help Yukino, I'll be fine. When he didn't hear back from him, Gaara spoke once more. Or, How about I just kill them both, how about that? He uttered, not realizing the repercussions for himself. At Gaara's words, Naruto came to a complete stop. After that, he was unable to hear anything, including Yukino or Chakra calling for him. He became enraged at the idea of Yukino and Chakra dying in front of him. He valued both of them equally, and he was not going to give in to Gaara's demands. Naruto was limited to one option. During his training, he and Kirin discussed how he was left with no other option. Kirin didn't want Naruto to depend on his dark form in circumstances where it wasn't necessary, so they both agreed that he would only use it as a last resort. This was his only option. He was afraid of what Gaara would do to Yukino and Chakra if he called forth one of his dragons. Gaara had control over their lives at the moment and could end them if he so desired. That was not going to happen thanks to Naruto. With his hair blocking his vision, Naruto clenched his fist and cast a downward glance. His entire body began to tremble. Naruto? Naruto? Yukino exclaimed, and Chakra pondered in their minds. They were concerned that he had not responded to them. They watched as he began to tremble, his fist clenched, unaware that they would soon find out. Unaware of how incorrect he is, Gaara remarked, it seems like you don't care about them like you said. Maybe we are more alike than I thought. Lifting his large hand, he started to squeeze, then stopped, slightly disappointed in what he was getting. It's not worth keeping them alive. Let's get it over with, Gaara added. Moaner. Gaara staggered a little as the ground began to tremble. Hey. Gaara cast a low glance at Naruto. When Naruto's hair flickered from yellow to black and back again, Yukino, Pakun, and Temari watched in shock, but Chakra knew what was going to happen when it went to black. Still in pain from the sand, Chakra said, he's going to use his dark form. Naruto's attire wavered between shades of red and blue and black and dark red, but this time, there were silver linings instead of blue ones. Around Naruto's body, tiny lightning sparks began to appear. The wind began to pick up and swirl, and it was so strong that parts of the tree bark began to peel off. With a sudden lift of his head, Naruto revealed his glowing green eyes before a red and black aura of dark energy surrounded him. As all of this was happening, Gaara was beaming with anticipation. He was going to face off against the enigmatic power that Naruto had revealed during the preliminary rounds. Yes. At last, Naruto Uzumaki, we can at last. Gaara was interrupted by a black blur. Naruto had transformed into his dark form, and everyone below was startled to see that he was standing in front of Gaara with his arm drawn back. Wham! With his enhanced strength, Naruto pummeled Gaara, sending a shockwave through the air that caused Gaara to stumble back from the force of the impact. NYAA. Gaara lost control of the sand that was holding both Yukino and Chakra as a result of the punch, and they were now falling. Swiftly responding, Naruto spread his wings, dove beneath, and grabbed hold of both Yukino and Chakra, holding Yukino in a bridal manner while Chakra was on Yukino's stomach. The way Naruto was holding her made Yukino blush, and when she looked up, she was shocked to see that he had wings on his back. How are you both doing? Naruto inquired, and Chakra gave a nod and purred. Yes, thank you, Naruto, Chakra replied, putting her hand on his shoulder. Jiraiya initially reacted the same way to Naruto's wings, but he quickly dismissed it, claiming he had witnessed far more bizarre things in his years. Naruto and Chakra then turned to face Yukino, who was staring at his wings in shock. Breaking her out of her shock state, Naruto said, Yukino. What? Speaking, she turned to face Naruto. How are you doing? He inquired once more. Naruto nodded as Yukino said, yes I am, thank you. Then, with a sigh, he hugged Yukino and tipped his head to nuzzle against Chakra, which caused both of them to flush and intensified Yukino's blush. Wah. With relief, Naruto remarked, I'm glad you two are safe. In response, Chakra purred. After initially being shocked, Yukino gave a tight hug in return, trembling slightly. With gratitude, she said, thank you. When Naruto felt danger approaching, he swiftly shot up into the air and avoided sand that was being thrown at him. Gaara yelled, come on, fight me, I've been waiting for this, and launched another sandstorm towards Naruto. Yukino inquired, what do we do now? Naruto said, swerving around the sand attacks, I have a plan, but I want to confirm something first. Yukino inquired, what are you going to do? I want to see if his sand will react if I get close to him, Naruto replied. Naruto shook his head at Yukino's suggestion, if you're going to do that, then why don't you drop me and Chakra on the ground? No, I don't want you getting caught by his sand again, Naruto replied. But, we're just going to slow you down then, Yukino replied. Yukino blushed and turned away as Naruto remarked, "You won't slow me down, you're safer with me. And trust me, I'll protect you no matter what." She grinned and said in a whisper, "Okay." Then, in an effort to move toward Gaara, Naruto vigorously flailed his wings, avoiding sand projectiles to protect Yukino, Chakra, and himself from harm. Naruto and Yukino observed that the sand responded to them when they approached it up close. The sand came flying at them, and he quickly ducked out of the way. Naruto remarked, "Well, that answers that. Why though? The sand didn't react when you were up close and got a hit on him," Yukino replied. "I was too fast for the sand to react. Unlike what happened with Lee with his fight against Gaara, the sand reacted just enough to protect him at first but then wasn't fast to shield him from Lee's fury of attacks as the fight went on. So because I was more faster than Lee, I got a hit on him without the sand's interference," Naruto responded. Yukino nodded. "Yeah, you were so fast that I didn't even know where you were. The only reason why I knew where you went was because of the shockwave you caused when you hit Gaara," she said, and Naruto replied. Then Naruto touched down on the earth, a short distance from Gaara. He gently lowered Yukino so that she could get up. Before Naruto could answer, he swiftly grabbed Yukino and used his wings to shield them from the sand that was beginning to encircle them. "So what's your plan now?" Yukino asked. Just as Yukino was about to lose it, Naruto took hold of her hand and gave her a comforting look. He bit his thumb, causing some blood to flow, and said, "Don't worry, everything going to be fine." As he started to squeeze his hand, Gaara raised his arm and opened his palm, saying, "Let's see if you can survive this." Sand burial. Summoning jutsu. Boom. A great deal of smoke shot up from the earth. Yukino and Naruto sensed that they were being raised into the sky, and she had to cling to Naruto to keep herself from falling. Two bright red eyes were staring at Gaara from within the smoke. From the smoke, a growl could be heard as Yukino, unsure of her surroundings, clung tightly to Naruto. Naruto comforted Yukino, nodding, "It's just my summoning, it won't attack us so don't worry." Yukino and Naruto sensed movement below, and after a brief period of silence, they heard RRROARRRRRRRR. There was a tremendous roar that sent shockwaves through the air, causing the smoke to part and revealing Naruto and Yukino's location. It was a red dragon that resembled Gaara in size. On its head were two black horns. Wide, open, fiery orange fabric encircled a pair of red wings. Yukino muttered, startled by what she was seeing, "A dragon." Yukino was taken aback by what she was witnessing. She muttered, then relaxed while holding on to Naruto after noticing his serene expression. Then, when she realized she was still holding onto Naruto, her blush got deeper. "I apologize," Yukino said, releasing Naruto. He said, "It's all right." The children's attention was drawn by the dragon's male voice calling out, "Master Naruto." "What further ways can I help you?" the dragon asked. Naruto pointed at Gaara and said, "Sorry to summon you out here, Ares, I just need your help taking him down." Gazing at Gaara, the red dragon, who was now called Ares, narrowed its eyes. Ares said as he launched himself into the sky, "So it's one of the tailed beast. The one. Tails Shukaku, I see. I'll gladly lend you my fangs and claws." "Thank you, we don't want to drag this out anymore than we already did. So we're going to power up as much as we can and deal a powerful blast to either knock him out or to where he can't move anymore. So, you ready?" Naruto replied, and Ares nodded its head. "Yes, it's a good plan, but it's not going to be easy. We have to keep him in place somehow in order for us to actually make contact," Ares replied. It took Naruto some time to come to a conclusion. "I got it, I can maybe bind him to where he can't move. But, only for a few seconds," he replied. Ares said, "Well, it will have to do. Let's get started," and then, shocking Yukino and Naruto, his body began to glow red. Naruto and Yukino were able to see red armor plates surround Ares' body beneath that brilliant glow coming from his body. His wings and tail were covered, and each new section appeared to slide out from under the previous one, covering his upper body, legs, and claws. The fabric had changed from leather to gray steel, giving the wings a metallic appearance. The sound of metal coming together was heard by both Yukino and Naruto, who turned to see another pair of red metallic wings beneath the first set. Ares' body was nearly completely covered in red plates. Around the newly constructed armor, Naruto noticed that there were glowing emerald green gems. A red helmet appeared out of nowhere and covered his face entirely, just like the other pieces did, as it started to wrap around his neck and face. Its eyes were the same emerald green color as the armor's gems. There were 2 tiny golden horns located along the helmet's jawline. Whoa, whoa. Yukino and Naruto exclaimed in shock at the abrupt change. The armored dragon called out, "Master Naruto, are you ready?" as each gem began to pulse. Naruto said, "Yeah, just one more thing," took Chakra out of his jacket, and turned to face Yukino. "Can you protect Yukino and Chakra while we execute this plan?" he asked Ares after bringing Chakra to her. "Master Naruto, you don't even have to ask. You have my word that nothing will happen to them," Ares replied. "Naruto Uzumaki, you really are a one-of-a-kind summoner. To think you already have the traits of a dragon despite not being one. You're willing to protect your loved ones first before your own safety. Haha, no wonder Flare liked him so much," he believed. With a nod, Naruto leapt into the air and faced Ares. After glancing at the armored dragon, Yukino turned to face Gaara, the sand creature. Then, with a flushed but worried expression, she turned to face Naruto. She knew he could handle himself against him, and he proved it to her by fighting him and defending Sasuke as well. She knew he was in good hands even though she was only a spectator because he was fighting with someone else. That didn't, however, make her stop worrying about him. When Yukino turned to face Naruto, Ares noticed the flush on her cheeks. She then grinned. "Well, it's not uncommon among our kind. I'm sure Flare won't mind," he reflected. Naruto turned to face Ares and then looked back. Naruto thought about how scary this new armored form appeared, being this close to it. It made sense why people feared dragons so much. Even without their power, the mere sight of them could have turned off a few foes. Naruto has to concede that Ares looked awesome in the armor, even though he was intimidated by it. He was curious about Ares' transformation and how she came about. Perhaps he could find out what this form is from him or Flare. The 9. Tails interrupted Naruto's thoughts, saying, "Hey kid, you can admire that form later. You have more important things to worry about right now." Shaking his head, Naruto turned to face Gaara. "Ares, are you ready?" Naruto inquired as he prepared. "Yes," he replied, getting ready as well. "Okay, let's go," exclaimed Naruto. With a "Ha! Ruar!" Naruto and Ares began to energize their auras. The green gems from the armor shined brilliantly, and Naruto's black and red aura, along with Ares' bright red aura, flared up. Naruto and Ares' aura suddenly blasted in, forcing Yukino and Chakra to brace themselves. She needed to cling to the armor to prevent herself and Chakra from being swept away by the winged creature. As Naruto was preparing to charge, he saw that Gaara was staring at them, motionless. This baffled Naruto. Was he allowing him to carry out their plan, including summoning a dragon, without encountering any opposition? Ares narrowed his eyes, seeing as well. Then he saw something on the forehead of one, Tails moving. "Master Naruto, channel Chakra into your eyes," he replied. Despite being perplexed, Naruto directed his chakra towards his eyes, which once more transformed into a web with 5 orbs and yellow markings. Now that he has better vision, he noticed that the beast's forehead sand began to swirl and that Gaara emerged. He made a single hand gesture and began to shake. "What is he doing?" Naruto thought, bewildered. Said 9. Tails abruptly, "Kid quick, don't let him finish what he's doing." Naruto lunged forward at Gaara in an instant. When the dark blast from Naruto approached Gaara, the sand shielded him. Damn, he thought to himself. Sand suddenly shot forward at Naruto, who quickly sidestepped. He then formed a ball of darkness with both hands by directing his dark energy into them. A wall of sand appeared in front of Gaara as he approached. With a forward thrust of his left and right arms, Naruto launched his dark blast towards the sand. Wham! Wham! Naruto continued as the smoke surrounded him. Upon emerging, he noticed that Gaara had closed his eyes and had stopped moving. Just as he was about to act, something senseless went off in him. He turns to face his left and notices the enormous hand rapidly approaching him. When Naruto realized he would not be able to dodge in time, he crossed his arms, sent his dark energy through his metal devices, and created a large shield. Wham! Naruto was launched skyward with a crash due to the force of the impact. Ares and Yukino exclaimed, "Master Naruto! Naruto!" simultaneously. With a concerned expression, Chakra turned to face where Naruto had crashed. We see Naruto rising from a crater he created as a result of the impact. Wincing slightly from the pain, he said, "Damn, I was caught off guard." As 9. Tails started to heal Naruto's body, he asked, "You alright, Kit?" Naruto replied, "Yeah, and thanks. If I hadn't raised a shield, then I would have taken some serious damage. Suddenly, a voice could be heard coming from all around the place. A voice spoke out from the beast that was entirely different from Gaara's ha 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 ha. Finally, it's time for me to come out. The 9. Tails said angrily, TCH. The transformation is complete, and Shukaku is now in control from here on out. You're going to be facing a full-on-tailed beast now. Great, what should I do? I didn't want to drag this out any longer, Naruto replied. You can only stop the transformation by giving Gaara a strong blow to wake him up. Once he does, Shukaku shouldn't be able to control him anymore. 9. Tails clarified. With a nod, Naruto began to reflect. I should be able to wake Gaara up without much trouble. Shukaku won't give me the chance to hit him. The sand shielding him is the only thing holding him back. Getting Gaara to wake up isn't a problem because I can bind both of them for a brief period of time. I also need to figure out how to refuel so that I can launch a potent attack with Ares. At that moment, Naruto thought back to a previous incident and performed a cross-hand gesture to verify his theory. Shukaku said, glancing at the armored dragon, oh, it's been a long time since I've faced one of you. Now I can actually get a chance to kill a dragon. Ares growled and muttered under his breath, damn. He was still charging, but it appears he will have to fight. He turned to face Yukino, who was staring toward the scene of Naruto's crash. Chakra was feeling the same way in Yukino's arm, and this worried her. They both wanted to see Naruto but were unable to do so. They wanted to find out if he was alright. Although Naruto was able to summon a shield in front of him that absorbed the full force of the attack, he still had to sustain some damage from the way he was knocked to the ground. Ares squinted his eyes and covered himself, Yukino, and Chakra with both of his armored wings in case something happened. Air style. Air. Multi-shadow clone Judas. Boom. Shukaku found himself encircled by a massive cloud of smoke that burst from the forest. 2,000 clones of Naruto, his wings spread, in their dark form, emerged from the smoke. To stop Shukaku from continuing his work, some Naruto sent dark chains to bind him. He and the girls were both exposed by Ares. Chakra and Ares witnessed Naruto's clones tying up the tailed beast. Yukino muttered, so many, in amazement at how many clones of Naruto there are. Shukaku yelled, what the hell, while attempting to escape. The rest of his clones trailed behind the real Naruto as he flew up with his sword raised. Charge! Naruto exclaimed, lowering his sword and gesturing to Shukaku. The Naruto clones charged toward Shukaku, unleashing a dark blast that, when it connected, created a screen of smoke. Some drew swords, while others created their own weapons. Shukaku used his tail to attack the clones even though his arms and the chains encircling his body were bound. The clones vanished in smoke, half of them. Naruto's sword began to swirl with fire energy as his eyes narrowed. Beside him, 4 clones materialized, brandishing swords and fluttering with energy. Water and wind energies, respectively, swirled around the swords of one clone, while earth and lighting energies belonged to the other 2. Sword art. Swords belonged to Naruto and the 4 clones. Naruto's was red, while the clones were blue, green, brown, and yellow. Fire style. Crimson Nova. Water style. Aqua Cutter. Wind style. Gale Storm. Earth style. Gaia's Judgment. Lighting style. Wrathful Thunder. The 4 clones and Naruto launched their assaults on Shukaku. The 5 attacks came together to form a multicolored beam of lightning. Spark energy. Whoosh! Shukaku was unable to avoid the blow and took the full force, causing a massive explosion. Goddamn you brat! Shukaku exclaimed. With a flap of his wings, Naruto approached Gaara and entered the smoke, using it as cover. After emerging from the smoke, Naruto approached Gaara until he was facing him. With a swift motion, he withdrew his arm and struck Gaara forcefully in the face, causing blood to flow from his nose. Ah! Shukaku exclaimed, are you kidding me? I just got here. Sand covered Gaara as he abruptly opened his eyes, looked at Naruto, and shot forward. Naruto swerved to get out of their way as soon as possible. Naruto questioned, was that all I needed to do? 9. Tails remarked, yeah, that kid is back in control now. We just got to deal with him. Naruto gave a nod. They were unaware that Shukaku still possessed some control, which he utilized to open his mouth. When Naruto saw the beast's mouth opening, he suddenly felt a rush of chakra. Together, blue and black spheres began to form. The 9. Tails and Naruto's eyes grew wide. Oh shish. He murmured. 9. Tails yelled, get away from it, Kit. Naruto didn't need to hear this instruction twice because he vanished and was now standing next to Ares. Naruto noticed a red aura enveloping him and could feel the dragon energy emanating from him. When Yukino and Chakra saw Naruto, they breathed a sigh of relief. It was good that he appeared to be okay. They both exhaled in relief as they said, "Thank goodness, thank goodness." Naruto caught their attention with, "Ares, we need to end this now. Are you done charging up?" Nodding, Ares said, "Yes, I'm ready when you are." Naruto gestured with his hands after nodding. He whispered, "Please work." "Leave," he continued. Where he crashed, in the crater. A dark form clone of Naruto was energizing his aura with dark energy. Then the clone vanished into thin air. Naruto felt a surge of power surge out of him and his aura began to flare up. Naruto exclaimed, "Whoa!" in disbelief as he felt his power grow. He had no idea that his eyes were glowing bright green and that the skin on his arms and a small portion of his face had begun to turn completely black. Chakra's expression changed from one of surprise to concern as she noticed Naruto's arms and some parts of his face turning completely black. Turning to face Ares, Naruto nodded at the dragon, and the dragon nodded back. Naruto exclaimed, "Let's do this." "Exactly," Ares answered. A red glow could be seen inside Ares' mouth as the faceplates on his armor parted and he opened his mouth to channel his dragon energy. With his hands clenched, Naruto channeled his dark energy into a small ball that grew larger as he applied more force. This is it, exclaimed Shukaku and Gaara as all the black and blue chakra orbs coalesced into one larger black orb. Beast Bomb with tails. With the last of his remaining control, Shukaku launched an attack toward Naruto and Ares, destroying the trees and ground in its path with its powerful blow. Draconic Rage. Dragon Arts. Cannon in the Dark. Together, Ares and Naruto unleashed their attacks. Naruto released a black beam of darkness and Ares released a deep red beam of fire. The three attacks appeared to have paused in time before colliding, but they continued to approach until they were only an inch away. Whoosh! As the three attacks attempted to overwhelm one another, their collision sent shockwaves and gusts of wind across the region. Naruto was taken aback by the tailed beast's strength. Not even his combined attacks with Ares could repel the tailed beast bomb sufficiently, and he was only up against one. Tails. He wondered who would prevail if he faced the 9 tails in a real battle rather than one for practice. Omi, obviously, no competition between you and me. Don't get me wrong, you are an ant in comparison to me, but you are still much stronger than what you were before. 9. Tails raised his voice. Naruto perspired at 9. Tails' remark, but he knew he was correct. This is only the first tailed beast he has faced, aside from 9 tails, and he could only speculate as to how much more powerful the other could be. Naruto then gave a headshake to help him concentrate. Naruto turned to face Ares and said, "We have to finish this right now," in a serious tone. Naruto nodded to Ares, saying, "Let's add more power, we're not getting anywhere at this rate." With more power behind their blows, Naruto and Ares' beams grew larger until they united into a single, reddish, black beam that started to deflect the tailed beast bomb. Chick. Gaara became irritated and gritted his teeth. Murmuring, Naruto said, "It's working." He turned to see how Chakra and Yukino were doing, and noticed that Yukino was gradually being pushed back by the force of the wind. Luckily, she was able to seize a fragment of the armor, saving her and Chakra from taking a flying start. A sigh of relief left Naruto. "This is our moment," Naruto declared. "Exactly," Ares answered. "Ha, ha." Together, Naruto and Ares unleashed more power, engulfing the tailed beast bomb and directing it toward Gaara, whose eyes widened in shock. Then the red and black beam swallowed Gaara and his tail's manifestation, and there was an explosion. Boom! After the smoke cleared, they could see that Gaara was slumping and began to fall toward the ground, and the copy of the tails was beginning to turn into sand and distort. He was still in midair when Naruto swiftly caught up to him, and he now dropped to the ground. Ares, who had expended too much dragon energy, was gradually descending to the ground in the meantime. "Ares, mister, are you alright?" Yukino questioned the dragon, her voice full of worry. "I simply expended a lot of energy," he replied. "I'll be alright. Feel free to call me Ares." His armor vanished. Yukino replied, "Oh okay. Yeah, I'm so glad it's finally over," Chakra sighed with relief. And then, as soon as Ares' wings touched the earth, Yukino and Chakra left him. Yukino called out to the dragon, Ares. Yukino bowed to the dragon and said, "Thank you for fighting alongside Naruto. You don't have to give me gratitude. I was happy to support Master Naruto during the fight. It's time for me to go home now," Ares said, blowing Chakra and Yukino away with a puff of smoke. Wah! Yukino let out a scream and tightly gripped Chakra. He had the opportunity to warn us, Chakra thought. Yukino and Chakra stood back up as the wind subsided, and they both exhaled with relief. "Glad it's over," Yukino remarked. Chakra nodded, closed her eyes, and turned to move in that direction. "What? To what destination are you heading?" Yukino questioned the cat. Chakra turned around, gazing back at Yukino before moving forward. "Hey, hold on," said Yukino, trailing behind Chakra. Scene alteration. After landing, Naruto laid Gaara down and retreated a step, but then he fell to his knees, reverting to his base form and panting heavily. Naruto thought to himself, "Damn, I'm more tired than I thought I would be." He was breathing heavily. "Why?" Gaara mumbled. When Naruto looked up, he saw that Gaara had a bloody look on his face and was staring at him with a tired expression. Naruto slowly approached Gaara, causing his eyes to widen. "Cease. Keep your distance from me," Gaara angrily yelled at him. Naruto ignored them and continued on his way, wearing a dejected expression. "It aches. Correct?" Naruto uttered those words, confusing Gaara. Gaara said, I don't know what you're talking about. The anguish of being by yourself. It is in fact intolerable, is it not?" Gaara widened his eyes but then glared coldly at Naruto. "How much do you know?" His voice grew icier than before as he spoke. Naruto paused, staring at Gaara sadly before raising his shirt to reveal a seal that caught Gaara's eye on his stomach. "Observe. Since I was in your shoes, I know exactly what you're going through. All by herself, with no one to turn to for assistance," Naruto remarked, making Gaara's eyes enlarge once more. His hand went to the seal and he said, "This is proof. This is the reason for it. The people in my village detested me. Demon and monster were the names they gave me. It was said, if you hadn't existed, the world would have been a better place." The two girls, Yukino and Chakra, were hiding in a bush and listening to what Naruto had to say. Both of them had tears in their eyes as they listened, and they were deeply saddened to hear this. Yukino took it harder and had to cover her mouth to not make a sound. Naruto took a deep breath to control himself. Gaara was just silently staring at Naruto, listening to what he has to say. "I detested them. Every single one of them. I didn't understand why they detested me at the time. They would yell at me to leave and throw me out of their stores. Sometimes, I had to fish for my food because I was completely alone and no one could help me," Naruto reminisced, looking down as he went through what he had to go through. Naruto kept drawing attention from Gaara, Yukino, and Chakra. "But then, I finally realized why they hated me. Why they called me demon and monster. It's because." Looking up, Naruto declared, "I have the 9 tails sealed within me." Sigh. When Yukino and Gaara turned to see what was making the noise, Yukino was staring at Naruto with her mouth taped shut and her eyes wide. When Naruto saw Yukino, his eyes widened, but he quickly looked down, seeing Chakra approach him slowly before leaping onto his shoulder and nuzzling his cheek. With a blank expression, Naruto gave Yukino one final glance before turning to face Gaara, who gave him a similar look. "Can you make out what I'm attempting to say?" Naruto uttered. "Why? Given how they treated you, why do you even fight for them? If you so choose, you could even kill them. But you shield them instead," Gaara said, sounding perplexed. Naruto gave a headshake. "If I get angry and kill them, then that will only demonstrate that their label of demon and monster was accurate," Naruto stated coolly. "So, how did you handle everything? You claim to be by yourself and without support. Thus, you ought to have followed my example." "But you're not," a bewildered Gaara exclaimed. Naruto looked at Yukino and said, "It's because I met someone that's very important to me. She saved me from being alone, despite what the others said about me." Naruto went on, "When we were younger, she still came and played with me, and I was happy. However, did you really have no one?" Naruto said, "You were left all by yourself, with no one to help you through it all," and he continued to walk toward Gaara until he was in his right place. Naruto spoke as his hand began to turn black. "No one saved you then, so let me be the one to save you now. What steps will you take?" Gaara inquired. Naruto placed his hand on top of Gaara's head and said, "I'm going to devour your darkness and lift you back up." A black flash then appeared, shrouding the area in darkness. The mental landscape of Gaara was engulfed in darkness as she floated. Gaara saw a light shining in front of him at that moment, but it quickly disappeared as his eyes opened slightly. What? Was that right? He uttered then. He noticed a black figure approaching him, but he was unsure of its identity. Who are you? He questioned, but the figure remained silent. Gaara was startled to see light begin to surround them and the darkness begin to fade until it was completely gone. Suddenly, the darkness that surrounded the two started to get absorbed by the figure. When Gaara turned to face the figure once more, she saw that it was Naruto, who was grinning slightly and staring down at him before reaching out a hand. Gaara glanced at the extended hand before turning her gaze back to Naruto. All right. Are you going to accept it or not? Naruto uttered. Gaara felt Naruto being pulled up, and his eyes widened and he hesitated before taking his hand. As the light began to get even brighter, Gaara squinted a little. Regaining reality after the black flash had disappeared and Gaara had fallen unconscious, Naruto took a few steps back and saw that his expression had changed to one of calmness. He glanced down at his hand and gave it a light squeeze. It took a lot, but I was able to absorb his darkness, and I feel like I got stronger from it. Just a little bit, Naruto mused to himself. Then, Naruto began to feel extremely exhausted and was ready to stumble backward when he felt someone grab him before he could fall. When Naruto turned to look behind him, Yukino was the one who had grabbed him. I'm grateful. Yukino simply nodded in response to Naruto's statement, unsure of how to respond. At that moment, two figures materialized in front of Gaara, displaying a protective demeanor. Kankuro and Temari were there. Gaara said, regaining consciousness, stop. Gaara? Kankuro and Temari turned to face each other and said, I'm done. Gaara said, so stop here. His siblings had never seen him look so composed. Okay. Kankuro nodded and started to pick him up, putting his arm around him. As the three siblings turned to leave, Naruto interrupted them, glancing back at Yukino. He said, wait. Temari, Kankuro, and Gaara pivoted back in his direction. Disorienting the three, Naruto remarked, I see I was wrong about something. And just what is that? Wondering what he was going to say, Gaara asked. Your siblings were present. They remained loyal to you in spite of everything. Naruto said, I think that's something you should cherish, which caused Gaara to widen her eyes. She then turned around and remained silent. Gaara nodded to his siblings and said, let's go. Kankuro nodded, and they walked away. Naruto let out a tired sigh. Naruto turned to her and said, we should go back. Without looking at her, Yukino nodded, and they started to move. He was contemplating what Naruto had said to him with Gaara. Gaara thought to himself, weird. I feel much calmer now. I wonder what he did exactly, before turning to face his siblings. I guess I should treasure them, Gaara pondered, inhaling deeply before continuing. Temari. Kankuro, Gaara said, grabbing their interest. What? I apologize. Gaara widened their eyes and said, for everything. Before saying anything, Kankuro gave Temari a quick glance. Don't stress over it, he uttered. Temari broke the silence after Gaara said, I'll try to be better. Gaara nodded, and they moved on. Let's get back home, you need rest, she said. When Naruto and Yukino were back together, they were silent as they leapt from tree to tree. Yukino, who had been silent the entire time they had been moving, caught Naruto's attention when he suddenly stopped, causing her to stop as well in confusion. What's not right? She inquired. Naruto answered, I should be asking you that. Yukino remained silent and cast her gaze downward, at a loss for words. Actually, she knew exactly what she wanted to say but was having trouble putting it into words. Do you think I'm scary? Naruto inquired. No. Yukino stammered out, cursing herself for stuttering. She was just thinking about what she had heard moments before, not being afraid of Naruto in the slightest. Naruto cast his shadowed eyes as he looked down. I see. I suppose that concludes it then, Naruto uttered, causing Yukino to look up at him and have her heart stop at his words. What? It said, she said. I don't blame you for being afraid of me now, anyone would if they heard I have the 9 tails inside of me. Naruto replied as he turned around. Yukino tried to say, hold on, but Naruto persisted in speaking. I would appreciate it if you kept this from being shared with anyone else. It's best for everyone, please. Naruto replied, and I understand if you want to distance yourself from me now. He then leapt to a tree in front of them, but as he did so, he felt someone embrace him. Looking back, Naruto saw that Yukino had encircled him with her arms. However, as a result, Yukino and Naruto were now moving in the direction of the ground. With lightning speed, Naruto grabbed Yukino, spread his wings, and climbed up onto a branch. Yukino, what? Naruto started, but she interrupted him. I'm not scared, Yukino cried out and shouted. I apologize if I gave you that impression. I was simply considering what you mentioned. How miserable you were prior to meeting me. How you were by yourself, with no one to support you, Yukino uttered while attempting self-calming. Yukino. Naruto began, but was interrupted once more. Nah. Kindly pay attention. I don't give a damn about the 9 tails being inside of you. Knowing this doesn't change my opinion of you because you're still the same Naruto I know from when we were kids, Yukino remarked, glancing up at Naruto with a serious expression. After a period of silence, Chakra said, I can tell that she is telling the truth, Naruto. Naruto gave Yukino a hug while maintaining eye contact. She blushed and shrank back a little as Naruto whispered, thank you, in her ear. Thank you very much, and I'm not going to tell anyone about this, Yukino replied in a whisper, getting his nod. Yukino nodded, and Naruto said, we need to head back now. With that, they started returning to the village. Skipping time, after returning without any trouble, Naruto and Yukino saw that the village had been completely destroyed and that there was no longer any fighting. Yukino whispered, it's this bad. It is unavoidable. Naruto stated, we must locate the others, and she nodded. We should try the hospital. With a worried expression, Yukino said, we need to check if Sasuke is okay. Naruto sighed inwardly as he nodded. As he started to accompany Yukino to the hospital, he thought to himself, sometimes I keep forgetting. You'll find someone, I'm sure of it just takes time, Chakra attempted to reassure him. After giving it some thought, Naruto shook his head and replied, maybe in future, but now's not the time for that right now. With a nod, Chakra said, you're right. Do you know where Kirin is? Inquired Naruto. Chakra remarked, he's at the hospital with that pervert. Naruto thanked, nodding. Yukino. Naruto uttered to catch her eye. What? He nodded. Let's pick up the pace. They started running toward the hospital, going by leaf ninjas who were searching for any survivors. They managed to reach the hospital after some running and entered. Once inside, they observed that many patients, mostly those involved in combat, were receiving treatment from the medical ninjas. Searching the area for Kirin, Naruto noticed him with Jiraiya and Flare and approached them, Yukino trailing behind. When they were within range, Flare called out as soon as he saw them approaching. Naruto. She uttered before approaching him. Hello, how was everything? He inquired. Before they could cause any significant harm, I removed those snakes as you requested. Naruto nodded as Flare said, and then after I did what you asked and protected the civilians. I appreciate you doing that. Flare blushed a little as Naruto petted her head, saying, I appreciate it. Yukino pouted at Naruto from behind them. Yes, a short while ago, I also felt Ares in the distance. Did you call him to discuss something? Flare inquired. Naruto gave a nod. Yes, to put it simply, we had a large issue that I needed assistance with, he remarked, and Flare nodded. Next, Naruto turned to face Kirin. Kirin, what transpired on your end? Mentally asked Naruto. The enemy withdrew after I defeated Orochimaru. Kirin looked at the pervert and said, I also learned something important that I have to talk to Jiraiya about later. How about the elderly man? Naruto inquired. I'm fairly certain your sensei will inform you, Kirin remarked, glancing down to put an end to the exchange before gradually fading back into Naruto's consciousness. After becoming perplexed, Naruto saw some marks on Flare's skin. Naruto opened his mouth to say, hey, but Yukino suddenly appeared from behind him. Yukino, Naruto. From behind them, Ino spoke. Glancing back, Naruto and Yukino saw their friend sprinting in their direction. With relief, Yukino said, guys, you're alright. With his arms crossed, Shikamaru uttered the words, somehow. Are you okay, too? Hinata inquired. Yes, we have heard that you two pursued Sasuke, but Sakura returned without you, holding him in her arms. Kiba said, barking at Akamaru, she said that the two of you were against that Gaara guy. Yes, we did, I was meant to fight him by myself, but, Naruto remarked, giving Yukino a sidelong glance. Naruto rolled his eyes as Yukino crossed her arms and said, but I stayed behind to help, I didn't want to leave Naruto alone with Gaara so we can fight together. Sakura looked relieved and said, well, we're glad you're okay. Sasuke has been put into a room but we can't go see him yet, as you can see. Choji said to get Naruto's attention. Hey Naruto. Yes, who is that? He asked, gesturing to Flare, who was silent. The group turned to face the girl, the boys blushing as they studied her, the girls looking shocked at her beauty with her red hair. With a scratch on his head, Naruto realized that she was still present. Well, this is, Flare interrupted Naruto as he was about to introduce her. Flare introduced herself, clinging to Naruto's arm and twitching her eyes as Yukino and Ino watched. My name is Flare, Flare said. She proudly declared, and I'm a dragon, letting her wings fly to reveal herself to the group. She grinned and said, nice to meet everyone. Everyone was stunned, with the exception of Yukino, who continued to glare at Flare while clinging to Naruto. Naruto sighed mentally in the meantime. Excellent, Naruto mused to himself. She's a real dragon, really. Sakura yelled, grabbing everyone's attention. Flare answered, that's right. However, how? In other words, why is a dragon here at all? Shino inquired. With those words, Flare turned everyone to face Naruto. It's simple really, Naruto summoned me here to help out. He made a contract with the dragons, you can say we're binded together. She continued, ain't that right, Naruto.kun, and gave him a shiver as she blew in his ear. As Yukino's glare grew more intense, Hinata and Ino glared at her as well. Naruto tried to speak but ran out of appropriate words, so he settled for, Well. With humor, Kirin remarked, it seems you're in quite the predicament huh? When Naruto turned to face Kirin again, he saw that Jiraiya was the only one left, grinning and giving him the thumbs up, which caused Naruto's eye to twitch. Why am I in this predicament? Naruto thought, his perspiration stopping. A voice behind the group said, you kids shouldn't be yelling, this is still a hospital. When the group turned around, their senseis were approaching them. Sakura turned to the senseis and said, oh Kakashi. Sensei, we're sorry. We were just surprised that the girl beside Naruto is a dragon. Flare then spread her wings and looked at the senseis. They just stared at her blankly as she waved and said, hello, similar to a trance. They were stunned until Ino said, hey sensei, what happened with Lord Third, is he alright? Arousing them. Worried, Yukino exclaimed, wait, what happened to Gramps? Naruto just listened, not saying anything. Kakashi began to say, Lord Third.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.